All right, we're on.
All right, so I'm calling to order the special meeting of the Ross-Town Council, the annual budget workshop on Thursday, April 29. The first item of business is the call to order and the roll call. Roll call,
Let's
Linda?
take roll call. Councilmember Breckus
Here.
and Councilmember Kircher. Councilmember Kircher. There a minute ago.
He's on the screen.
All right, let's go on. Councilmember Cool
Here.
and Councilmember McMillan
Here.
and Mayor Robbins.
Here. The next item, number 2, is posting of the agenda. Has the agenda been posted?
Yes, it has.
Item number 3, open time for public expression. This is for members of the public to offer comments about an item that's under the town's jurisdiction. Your comments are limited to 3 minutes. Are there any speakers, attendees raising their hand? I don't see any.
Well, we have one attendee and they're not raising their hand.
It looks like Bill is back, so you can include him in the roll call.
Yes, Bill, are you present?
I am now present. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties, too many Zoom accounts and frankly, too many monitors, too many speakers, but I think I'm here. I think this is Ross, not the Supreme Court, not a telescope in the background, so I'm good.
Great. Then we move on to item 4, which is the budget presentation and discussion of the draft Town of Ross budget for fiscal year 2022. Joe?
Thank you, Mayor and council members. I'm going to share my screen. Just let me get it called up. Hold on. Okay, could everybody see my screen now? Okay. Well, thank you, Mayor and council members. We're here today to provide the town council overview of the budget and to be here to answer any of your questions, comments, and receive your guidance for the fiscal year 21-22 budget, which starts on July 1 of 2021. For simplicity, obviously in government, our fiscal years go July 1 to June 30th. I'm going to refer to the fiscal year ending to make it simple. Instead of saying fiscal year 21-22, I'm going to refer to that as fiscal year 22. If I was referring to say fiscal year 18-19, I'll say fiscal year 19, just to make it easier. This is a workshop. It's to be informal. I want to hear your questions at any time. It's much easier. Workshops I found are the hardest thing on Zoom compared to being live, because I could see when you want questions. So please speak up and ask questions at any point. This is for your information and to be able to answer your questions. So feel free to ask questions at any time. If I can't see you, just speak up, or Linda, I can't see, just so you know, on my screen when I cannot see all 5 council members at the same time. So so just speak up or however. I'm going to go through the budget overview and a summary of the entire picture. And then we're going to walk through every department, and the department head will go through their budget. So there will be time to ask them any question you want related to their services and their departments. The budget reflects the work plan for the coming fiscal year. It provides the funding to provide both our existing level of services and some new programs and projects that we'll highlight in this presentation. The budget's developed based on our continuing objectives of providing efficient, effective, responsive services in a financially responsible way. The budget schedule, we had our council strategic workshop on February 25th, where we went through the 5-year financial forecast, the draft capital improvement plans, which is CIP for short, and also talked about this upcoming budget and what projects and projects, a discussion between staff and council of what to include in the upcoming budget, which is now before you today. And on June 10th, we have our town council hearing for the budget adoption, along with all of the accompanying resolutions that go with it. Yeah, the foundation always is of our services is our town goals. And we look at our 7 goals, and they have programs, projects that are help meeting the goals that you've established. We did add at the workshop a new goal, number 7, the promoting environmental stewardships. And you'll see items such as prepare a climate action plan this year as part of that. Obviously, when you talk budget, I look at goal number 2, sustain financial responsibility. Just so you know, the budget before you is a balanced budget with no use of reserves or fund balance for the operating fund or general fund services, similar to all the budgets I brought before you in the prior years. And yeah, so it is a balanced budget, and we look very much to sustain that financial responsibility, including building in like our facilities fund, buildings, as much capital as we can over there to help fund our deficient, obsolete facilities that we'll need to replace in the coming years. Just a quick overview on what our funds are. There's 2 main categories and then subsets within. We have our general fund, which includes our operating fund. And first, our overall budget we're proposing for this coming year is all funds, $10.6 million. It is the general fund's 8.6 million of it. And the general fund has the operating fund, and that's where all our service departments are located. There's only a little capital in the operating fund. It's our police department, fire, public works, planning and building, recreation, and general government. Then we have within the general fund, the facilities fund, and that's where we do our general fund capital expenditures, which includes all our buildings and facilities and park facilities. And then we do have a 1.5 million emergency fund. To my knowledge, it is for emergencies, and to my knowledge, we've never needed it. Hopefully we never do need it, but it is there in the case of a major occurrence where funds would be needed. Then we have special revenue funds. Now, special revenue funds could only be spent on specific purposes based on law, or based in the case of like the public safety tax, based on the tax measure says what that could go for that example, that the public safety tax could only be used for police and fire expenditures. The top 3 of those special revenue funds, gas tax, roadway, and drainage, are all for capital facilities or maintaining those capital facilities. And then we have the COPS fund, which is a state grant, which helps provide the funding for one of our police officers, and the general plan update fund, which helps implement elements of the general plan, or when we do the actual general plan update. Is there any questions on our funds or structure before diving in? Starting with kind of our revenues on the big picture, the COVID pandemic recession reduced our town revenues over the past 2 years. In the case of recreation, building, and interest income, we're down over $900,000 annually compared to where we were in 2019. Overall, they're coming back some, those revenues. But overall, the general fund revenues the this year we're expecting a 4.5% increase, which will bring us back to our revenue levels of 3 years ago in 2019. Our largest and the revenue that's the most stable, it doesn't go up big, but it doesn't go down without a huge recession, is property tax. It's expected to go up 3.1%. Other taxes is sales tax, property transfer tax, franchises. This is expected to go up 10%. Now that's largely because sales tax took a COVID dip and now it's coming back. So it's really a return to where we were. You'll see a big change in intergovernmental revenue, 65%. And this is because we have 2 planning grants that total $95,000 related to updating town housing policies and streamlining certain types of residential housing development projects. A category that has been hit and continues is investment income and rents. The rents are doing fine. It's the investment income. Obviously, with interest rates going down, here we've had a significant decrease. It's decreased $180,000 from 2 years ago, and don't see that returning until interest rates take another turn back. You'll see under here the department revenues, planning and building, building still trying to get back to 2019 levels. This is a part way back. The revenue that's the hard one to really see what's going on here is recreation. Last year, we thought at the time we did the budget, there was opportunity to do more things, would open up with programs during the fiscal year we're currently in. Obviously, that didn't really happen. So where the budget's going up 3% compared to where we actually estimate ending up this year is going up over 40%. So though that being said, recreation is still a long way from its peak, and there's a lot of room still left to increase. In 2019, we were at $875,000 in revenue. This budget has it at $509,000. And obviously, if COVID restrictions ease sooner, we'll see that actually go up more than this. But if they tighten down harder again, then they could actually go down. So that one is really tied to COVID very heavily, of how many people you could have in a classes. Can we do basketball? Can we run soccer, dance, and those kind of classes, and how many people you're allowed in the program? Is there any questions on the revenues? And I think I'll go into another table on revenues. If we want, we could go into the budget document itself. If you do have questions, please just stop me at any time. So moving big picture expenses, as I say, we're going to go through every one of these departments. Overall, general fund expenses are going up a little over 4%. If you recall, last year, every department had a decrease from the prior year outside of fire. So this is kind of just getting us back to the closer to 2019 levels overall. As I said, we will have a lot of time because we're going to walk through every one of the departments. If you do have broad questions now, but we'll definitely be going specifically in all of these. And then you look at our overall fund balances, and this is in millions of dollars. At the end of this year, fiscal year 21, we're expecting to be at $13.9 million. You see, we bottomed out at the end of the Great Recession, 2010, 2011. The bottom year was 2012. And since then, we've been steadily increasing in fund balance every year. And as I said, one of the things we did even in the last years, even with this COVID recession, which decreased our revenues, we've cut expenses more than revenues. So we're still been increasing in fund balances over that time. So any questions on the overall fund balance, and I'm going to move into the operating fund balance from here. Operating fund, you'll see a similar pattern. We bottomed out in 2012 building. Now, you will see after 2020, we were at, which was last fiscal year, we were at 4.5 million. We're expecting to be at 3.5 million. The reason for this decrease is because last month you authorized staff and approved transferring $2 million from the operating fund, where our budget had 550,000. We increased it to 2 million. Transfer from this fund to our facilities fund to help pay for our deficient facilities we know need to be replaced. So this drop here in 2021 is solely because we increased moving money to where we're going to need it in the future for our facilities.
So can I ask a question here? So it would have been but for that 2 million transfer, it would have been a 5,523,000.
Yeah, but we had budgeted 550,000. So it would have been, if we didn't do increased transfer, we would have been at about 5 million. Because we always, as our plan is always in our budget now to at least do $500,000 transfers to that. But you're correct, it would be a higher figure. In this case, if we followed through on just keeping at the budget level, it will be about $5 million.
So what explains this steady increase that we are experiencing?
I think it's kind of, to be honest, it's a deliberate to try and get as much money over to the facilities fund as we can, knowing we have pressure, and also to get enough funding to help in pension obligation payments. So we also have in each of these years' budgets a minimum of $200,000 where we're putting either in our PARS Section 115 plan for pensions or directly funding CalPERS to pay additional unfunded liability costs to try and keep those costs lower. And the good news is when we're doing it, we are reducing our future cost of those. So it's been very deliberate pattern of trying seeing our two places of high financing needs is facilities and pension obligations.
But are we, I mean, there's that rule that you can't charge more for services to create a profit margin. And I guess I'm wondering is the fact that our, we're going up. If you look at this trend, does that reflect some concern?
No, we are following, we only fund costs, we pay what, this isn't because of, if you remember, those revenues are not where those have actually been struggling. And those fees are set at the cost of service. There is no profit, not even close to profit in any of those. So it's really the other revenues, the general taxes being property taxes, in effect, we're just not spending. We've been saving some and to help out with these other bigger notions of capital and pensions. There could be a need, I would say, some would say we do need additional staff position here. And I've been holding back to do that because we've been able to save more money by not having additional staff here.
Are you going to go into that later?
We could, yeah.
Okay.
Joe, a question on how long are we going to have to pay for this unfunded pension liability? Is this just going on in perpetuity, or when is this going to end?
It's probably in the reality. I mean, you have a schedule. They say, oh, if you do everything the next 20 years, you're paid off. But the reality is every time they do not hit their investment target, which is frequently, then it creates more unfunded liability. So the reality is it probably goes on into perpetuity because they're not going to continuously hit the investment target. Now, if they hit it every year or have the same number of years higher and lower. So I talked to our actuarial every few months, and we have a loss that's going to be reflected in this coming years. That's already in this budget, that they only had 4.5% rate of return. Well, so they missed the mark. They're supposed to get 7%. That's 2.5%. That will cost significant money, over $500,000 of new unfunded liability. Obviously, we did that 600,000 payment. So we're treading water. Now there's going to be a gain unless the stock market collapses these next months. There's going to be a gain coming up from this year. Now, what they could do, the question is, do they give it to us, in effect, reducing the UAL? But what they're talking about doing is lowering the investment rate of return from 7% to something lower, in effect, eat up the gain. But on the other hand, if 7% becomes something lower. So it is kind of a continuous catch up. I will say where Ross has been in a very good position is we've been keeping up with it and reducing our long-term cost. We've also shortened it. They have you on a 30-year schedule. We've made it a 20-year schedule. And by 30-year schedule, sometimes you're not even paying your principal, which means you're automatic. It's ridiculous. They shouldn't even let you do 30-year, I don't think. But so, it's to keep it what I'd say in a sustainable range, that, where some jurisdictions are expecting 15-20% increases a year, we're now down to the 7% increase a year, which is still higher than inflation, but it's putting us in positions to.
So another question, assuming the revenue remains the same, once we reach that $7 million facilities threshold, then we're going to have additional monies, right? So, so what will we continue to do further?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think you continue, because the bottom line is the more you get in that fund, the lower the tax measure needs to be. I mean, I could see now that my guesses were a year delayed from where we were expected to be. Could we be at 8 million? Yeah, very easily. Now, that being said, I wouldn't wait, if you wait 5-10 years, yes, we'll have more money, but the costs are also going up every year. And right now our interest income, where, when you look at our investment rates, at least in life 2 years ago, and CalTrust was over 2%. Now we're getting like negligible interest income. So obviously our money sitting in the bank's going to be losing to inflation over time too. But that being said, I would expect there would be more than 7 million by the time we could get to construction. And part of that's, I think, construction's probably a year further off than I would have said a year ago. And any other questions? If not, this is just a kind of the pie chart of our revenues. And as I said, property taxes has been our big revenue, but this percent has grown almost every year I've been here, the percent of the total. Now, if you count property tax plus public safety tax, which is our tax, parcel tax, those two are 69% of the revenues of the town. And a lot of jurisdictions, other taxes could be just as big as property taxes. Obviously, other taxes being sales tax, property transfer, business license is pretty negligible here. It's 4.6% of the total. So, there's been some bounce back in that, but we're probably, of all California jurisdictions, definitely in the bottom 5 or 10 relying on other taxes, which means the ultimate importance of property taxes. Then, you look at our second largest revenue, which is building. Traditionally it's closer to 10%. It's working its way back to 8%. There still is the COVID definitely, we saw a reduction in building valuation once COVID started. It's bouncing back some, so it's getting back. Expected to get back to 10% again, but in next year's budget, we have it 8%. Recreation was also 10% of revenue. That's now at 6%. Obviously, this is that COVID, these two are very much COVID related. And I mentioned investment and rents. Our rents are doing well, which is our cell tower leases a post office. However, investments, as I mentioned, is down $180,000 a year compared to where we were because of interest rates. Now, obviously, if interest rates go up, we're going to get more investment revenue. So any questions relate to kind of the revenue side of the picture? And if you want, we could go into the budget and look specific revenues, but this is an overview. And if there's any questions on revenues, probably a good time to ask them.
I'm sorry, can I just ask, the investments and rents of 316, that is where we put the post office revenue?
Yes, so that includes, I'm going to look into the budget. So we have, that's a combination of the post office next year is going to be like $133,000. Cell tower leases, $122,000, and interest, which used to be $240,000 plus, is going to be down to about $60,000. And if you want the detail, it's in your budget binder. Oh, I should have mentioned, a lot of today we'll be walking through this when we get into the departments, but that's tab G, page 9 in your binder. That goes through every revenue line by line. Any other questions on the revenue side? And I'll go into, I'll just do my binder side for a second. On the expense side, and this is by category, kind of by category type, wages and benefits make up about 42% of our total expenses. And then the second biggest is really the Ross Valley Fire JPA. It's 26%. And and as you could see, outside services is our third. That's our contracts. That is now at 12%. That used to be a higher percent. Over time, we've reduced our contracts. This year's about a no change, really, dollar value wise from last year. These are consultant contracts like our attorney, building administration, accounting, a number of planning consultants, and then just miscellaneous other contracts we have. And the one thing about this is only the general fund, 8.6 million. The capital we're using, and I'm proud that we are investing in our facilities, and obviously there's more to do. It's 10% of our general fund at 837,000. In reality, we spend a lot more of that in capital because we have the special revenue funds, the roadway and drainage. So overall, this year's budget, we have 2.4 million in capital. Just, most of it is outside of the general fund. When we go into the departments to see the split of cost, 50% of it's public safety, fire and police. And then you get the next set of departments, planning, building, public works and recreation combined are about 30%. Well, building is all fully funded by department revenues. Recreation's largely paid for by revenues, and a substantial portion of planning is paid from revenue. So yes, we do have department revenues, and the rates are set to recover the allowable cost of those services. So, the general tax dollars are going to a lot of the public, obviously public safety and like capital expenditures. Obviously, the departments that have fees associated with it pay for could be a significant amount of their department costs through those fees and charges and other revenue sources. And then I was going to go to staffing. It kind of fluctuates year to year. We did reduce staffing in recent years with the COVID recession, for example. Recreation, this is full-time equivalents. Now going from this budget year to next, we're at 21.2. We're expected to go to 22.3. And the increase is largely in recreation instructional leaders, all part-time workers, but as we're all offering more programs and classes. But that's also a lot of the decrease between 20 and 21 was recreation was cut back largely. And, what it looks like overall is we have 8 police officers. Our full-time equivalent, every worker in recreation is part-time, so their hours adjust with the level of activity, is 4.8. And then the other 9.5 people, we have 4 people in planning and building, 3 in public works, and 2.5 in general government. Is there any question about staffing? But there's no new staff positions this year. It's all hours adjustments and like our part-time, how much hours of part-times in recreation we need.
Can I ask a question about the chart that had expenditures and outside services, and then looking at planning and building expenditures? I imagine outside services includes like plan check for kind of plan checking we do outside of planning and building.
Correct.
But then when you quote what the expenditure is by department for planning and building, did you capture that in that, or was that just?
Yeah, yes. The planning and building will be the whole department's expense, including the outside, the contract services. It includes everything, our internal wages, benefits, contracts, any service supplies by. We have, like project tracking, the software and stuff will all be captured within that number.
And what is the company doing our plan check right now?
CSG.
Okay.
Well, we do, and internally though, the small jobs, this is one of the things that changed, where before we used to send them all out to contract. Now our building inspector does a number of the building plan checks internally. So we only really send out the larger jobs to CSG. So we're doing a lot more in-house that used to go to contract. Thus, that's part of where our outside service contracting costs have decreased. That's one area that it decreased significantly over time. And you'll see when we go in the planning and building budget, when we go specifically in the numbers there, you can really see some of that transition over time.
Okay.
Very, very good questions. Any questions on staffing? And then, okay, moving into what does it all mean? You put it all together. This is the top line picture of it. As I said, we have a balanced budget. Our revenues, our net changes in our operating fund, revenues are budgeted at $15,196 over expenses. Our facilities fund, which is part of our general fund, is $2,000. So cumulatively, our general fund has a positive $17,196. We get our special revenue funds. Remember, the top three are for capital. Our whole goal is to accumulate funds to pay for facilities. So in our special revenue funds, we're showing 393,000 more in spending the revenues for the year using fund balances. For overall balance of that, we'd spend 376,000. However, I will say on capital funds, it's you budget it, but it's rare that you'd ever spend all the capital funds in a year just because the projects they don't all get to that level of completion of design or construction to happen in the year. The reality is we're not going to likely spend this much more in capital projects in the year that as much as we're budgeting. So it's budgeted, but it's given timing, it's at a very aggressive schedule of being able to construct. So in the end, as you saw, likely this will be a very different when the actuals come in. And that brings us to the big picture. This is our town income statement. And this is in your binder. It's tab D, page 8. I would say of all the tables in here, if you want to understand the overall town, this is the table. This is our income statement. It really shows the big picture of everything going on. I'll walk through a few parts and please ask questions. And I know there's a lot of, has a lot of information, but also if you ever have questions, please, on any of the budget items, but this, if you have questions or want to understand something better, just let me know. I'm more than happy to walk through this with anybody or any elements of the budget. We're starting the year with our fund balance, and this is what we're is as of 6/30/21. So what we're estimating we're going to be at June 30, 2021. You can see we have, in the general fund, we're estimating $11 million, overall funds, 13.9 million. The most, starting with the operating fund, which is all our departments. You see, we have our operating fund starting at 3.5 million, our revenues by category, and we're expecting 7.7 million of those. And then we get to our budget expenses, and then this is each of our departments, and then the capital, and you see 7.8 million. So you take this less this, and you're showing $171,000. Could you guys see the pointer on my screen, by the way? Hopefully.
Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay. Then we have transfer ins and outs. And the important one is, as we talked about, it's the public safety tax for police and fire. So that's in its own fund, collected, but we transfer it to the general fund, to the operating fund to pay for police and fire. So that's 906,000. And so after you go through all the transfer ins and outs, you end up with a $15,000 positive balance. I will say we are including, and this is what I'd say is very financially responsible, our additional $200,000 to pension unfunded liability than over what the state requires. So that's part of it too. So overall, we are making progress on our pensions as we talked about, but these costs obviously rise over time. And that ends up with our ending fund balance of expected end fund balance of 3,538,000. Now I mentioned that transfer to next fund's facilities fund. This is where we're paying for our any buildings and park type facilities. And you'll see with that additional $2 million transfer, as we said, our target's to get to 7 million, we're at essentially $6 million. And we are expected to end this year about there, but we've also this year does have master plan costs related to town facilities. So we will be starting the current estimate of $14.6 million for the facilities is the master plan's part of the expenses, and that will start this coming fiscal year. And then we have our emergency fund, and that gets our total general fund. And then you have all the special funds. Now, we will be walking through, each of the department heads are going to walk through their departments and what services they're providing. And we'll also walk through each of these individual funds. But is there any question on this? Oh, I want one big note. And I mentioned it was in the budget message. What is not included in this budget to date is the federal government's American Rescue Plan, ARP. The president signed on March 11th, 2021, the American Rescue Plan. It allocates $461,000 to Ross. Right now, the Treasury has yet to issue any guidelines of what the rules, requirements, restrictions are of the money. So at this time, I do not have it in the budget, either the revenues or expenses. We're expecting the revenues to be available in 2 installments, one as early as this fiscal year by June 30th and one next year. And the spending will be eligible through the end of 2024. So for now, given we don't have the rules and restrictions, that's not in the budget. I'm expecting those to come out in these coming weeks, and we will put it in and bring that to you with the June budget if we could allocate it in June. I was hoping they'd have the instructions by now, but they don't. Obviously we'll get what allocated into the budget, but right now we're waiting for that information. So there will be a change, likely to be a change to the budget for that. There's going to be other minor changes, but that would be a substantial change that I'm expecting. But it would be a revenue, and then what can we expend it on, and a discussion with council about what those options and potential uses are. So any questions overall or on any of this? This is the big picture, and then we're going to go into programs in each of the new programs and departments.
Joe, thank you. Just a reminder to everybody, we have a hard stop at 12:30. So now that we have the overview, we'll pace ourselves to get through each of the, individual programs. And then, as I said, we have a hard stop at 12:30.
Thank you, Mayor. And with this, what are the new things we're looking to do this year or expand this year? And obviously we're continuing the COVID safety procedures. There's a heavy emphasis, and it matches goal 4 of our town: maintain a safe community and improve emergency preparedness. We have, with the new Marin Wildfire JPA funds, we have this year expecting $110,000 of funds. We're going to have the vegetation management, where last year we did the neighborhoods along the roadways. We covered the area in Baywood, Wellington, Crest zone, and then on the other side of town, Upper Road and Woodhaven and Upper Road West. This year, it's looking at targeting vegetation management in the Winding Way, Laurel Grove, Pomeroy, Canyon area. Also, defensible space inspections. We got to about half the town last year, so we'll get to the other half in this coming fiscal year. That being said, the compliance rate was, right now, there's a lot of education in all these programs. There's a long way to go on compliance on the defensible space inspection. So hopefully when we go to, we're trying to get to all the houses one round, but then in the following years, we're going to go back. Hopefully the percentages are going up. Also coming out soon will be evacuation route maps and information related to that. We have setting up for maintaining and improving our facilities. We have a lot of master plans that we have to do first. So you'll see this next line, Town Facilities Master Plan, obviously here. The Ross Common Landscaping Plan. We hired Gates and Associates, so in the coming months, you will have public meetings and engaging them on that. The goal is to have that project completed, the master plan of Ross Common in the fall, so we could start the rehabilitation this fiscal year and next fiscal year, or when I say next, the two coming fiscal 2 years. And then we have storm drainage master plan, looking at our drainage facilities. We've been doing lots of small drainage improvements. We have the, and we finished the Bolinas, which is a bigger one, re-looking at our system to see what are the improvements needed. Obviously, we have the county flood control project in the Ellen Park area that we'll be discussing at our next council meeting. We have 2 undergrounding utility districts, one, the Town 20A one around town hall facilities that's directly working with PG&E, and then the 20B one, which is the West Ross one. Then, related to strengthening and getting community involvement, obviously COVID's been hard because of all the restrictions and social distancing. It's to look at it as we can't, obviously always being COVID safe, outdoor dining, movie nights, partnering events with entities such as Ross Auxiliary. We have the age-friendly Ross strategic plan, which was put on hold during COVID, but we're looking to get that really going with Terry Dowling. And then climate action plan update. Really, this next counting, that's a series of ones from planning, starting the general plan housing element update. We have the objective design standard zoning code update. We're looking at a downtown revisioning and zoning review. We have to do a vehicle miles traveled ordinance as part of the projects. And then we have a big negotiation that we're starting in the renegotiating the Ross Valley Fire Department JPA agreement with the fire station future changes. So this is kind of a highlight. There's some other things we're doing that we could get as we go in, but these are some of the bigger ones. Now, this is just programs and projects, not including, there's capital planning here, but not the list of capital improvements on this. Related to the capital itself, projects, we have our annual road pavement program. This year is going to be Ross Common in the downtown area, Redwood Drive along the common up to the elbow, and the post office parking lot. We have the Laurel Grove pedestrian pathway and road improvements, design and start of construction in the next fiscal year, and the beginning of the Ross Common landscaping project. We do have Ross Common wells that need to be rehabilitated. All 3 wells have issues, and it may be we have to go deeper on one or more of them too. So it's either cleaning, maintenance, or there might be even needing to go further for the relates to Ross Common and water. We have the Winship Bridge design and site preparation work, ADA improvements at Town Hall, and we always have various improvements, quite frankly, at the public safety building and Town Hall buildings. And then we have in the budget, based on our discussion last time, the electric vehicle charging station conduit at the post office. And are there any questions on any of the projects from that page or the prior page or this page? We will be walking through the capital side. So they're going to be, the capital ones going to come up, a lot of them again, when we go through each of the departments or funds.
Joe?
That's when we'll talk about whether we do anything about a charging station is a little later in the meeting. And
Or we could do it now. I mean, this is a fine time to do that conversation now too.
I mean, that's one of the main topics that we're offering opinions on. I mean, why not do it now?
Okay.
Uh,
And I might have, I could explain if Rich needs to come on, he'll come on too. So part of the conversation, if you recall, was whether we should put an electric vehicle charging station. And where we ended up was to put conduit in so we could do it in the future. And part of that's because we're doing the Ross post office parking lot. So obviously now's the time to put in the conduit. That being said, the cost in the budget ended up higher than I certainly was expecting. I think you were expecting, and it ended up about $10,000. But I think it's because we ran it from the building all the way to Lagunitas, and staff rethinking about it. We think a better location instead of putting it out at Lagunitas would be to move it in between the post office building and 3 Ross Common, which would be much closer to downtown. And that would reduce the cost, depending where, to instead of a $10,000 conduit, could be something under $4,000. But I will now open it up to council to hear your thoughts, comments.
I mean, when we had talked about this before, that we were discussing how would this actually help increase electric vehicle ownership in Ross? And there were comments that perhaps not, because virtually everyone in Ross who has or wants an electrical vehicle will have their own station, a charging station. Is it a good public service thing? Maybe, but does it take away much needed parking spaces? Maybe. And that's how we got to this point of, well, maybe we don't really need it right now because many of these just stay empty and use up spaces that people from Ross want to use when they go to the Common or to the post office. I agree, Joe, $10,000 is a lot. If it's 4,000, maybe that's not such an unreasonable outlay. One question is, if we didn't do this and we waited 5 years when, you know, many more people have electric cars, might the technology change so that we'd be putting in a completely different kind of conduit?
I'm going to bring, if we could bring Rich, if you have thoughts on that, answers to that.
Yeah, good question. The conduit is just so we could run the power from the meter location on the side of the post office up to the future location of the charging facility. So it's that wouldn't change through technology. That's been pretty standard throughout the years.
Okay, well then, does anybody want to comment about the new location and the conduit, thinking that now it's maybe $4,000 and not 10? If you raise your hand, I can see you because I can see the participants. So who would like to speak? Yes, Julie. And then lower your hand.
Okay, I'm lowering my hand. I'm just wondering, Joe and Rich, are we the only jurisdiction in Marin that does not have an EV charging station? Do we know?
I'm not sure of the rest of the agencies. I know San Anselmo had a big program where they installed a whole bunch of them in their parking lot near Town Hall. And I think they might have even taken some of those out, but I know we're definitely not leading the pack. Marin County as a whole has several projects going on. San Anselmo, I'm not sure about Novato, Mill Valley, and the rest.
You know, I expressed these thoughts before. I just feel like, you know, California is not going to be selling any gas cars by 2035. And this is the wave of the future. And I'm hopeful that the 461,000 that's coming from the American Rescue Plan may provide some costs for EV, and maybe we should wait and make a decision once we see what kind of uses we can use for that money. But I think this is the wave of the future, and we need to support this.
And so Julie, are you saying you would do not just the conduit, but you'd actually put in a whole station right now?
Yeah, I would.
Yeah, I mean, I would be okay with the conduit, but not the station because of parking and because of thinking that everyone in town who has an electric vehicle either charges it at work or at home. And we don't really have that many, passers-by who are going to be charging in the center of town. But that's my opinion. Who else would like to speak? Just raise your hand and I can call on you.
Yeah.
Oh,
there's
I
my
meant
hand.
raise your hand on the screen. But Bill, I saw your hand in
Okay,
real
I'm
life.
trying to get my hand in front of the camera. It's
Is-
harder than you would think.
You is not-
I do support the conduit. As I understood it, we were getting ready to do improvements to the parking lot. Seemed like a good time to put the conduit in. I mean, perhaps I also agree with Julie, perhaps further decisions could be awaited, but if we need to move ahead with that parking lot now, I would favor at least putting the conduit in to avoid future expense, having to trench the parking lot after we've redone it.
Yeah. Anybody else? Beach.
How much does a charging station cost?
It depends on there are some grant funding opportunities through TAM and MCE. But I'm not aware of what those current plans are. I think we kind of wait for a cycle. I'm not sure there's a cycle right now, but normally they cost around 12 to 15 grand to install a single or two stations on a single pole. That's just for the facility itself. And if you run the conduit, you've covered all of that cost already. So they just would need to run power and install the facility. It's about 12 to 15 grand.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Breckus.
I'm still confused. Where is this going to be? Is it? I didn't remember landing last time that it was Lagunitas, but now it's going to be in the back of the post office.
No, we did a preliminary walk, I think 2 weeks ago, and somewhere between the post office and Frederick Allen Park, there's those rows of parking, and there's two handicap places right there too, up near that where the bikes come out of Frederick Allen Park. So we thought that would be a good place to, at least run the conduit to one or two stalls for one or two future stations in that location.
And we would, do we not need all that handicap parking spaces? Is that not?
The handicap parking would remain, and one of the stalls for the charging station would be one of the handicap stalls, so that a handicap driver can use that either to get to the post office or they can charge their van. But it would just take up one regular parking stall and the handicap ramp per station. And then if we wanted to install more stations, we've got the handicap covered by the first one, and the rest would be normal stations, but they would be restricted to the use of the charging station.
By a handicapped person?
I need a correction. I don't think, in talking to our one of our building officials, that it doesn't necessarily need to be handicapped on the charging station. But anyhow, we need to look into that. But I thought, hearing from our previous chief building official, he said that wasn't a requirement.
No, it's good practice, but no, that's not a requirement.
So that would leave us with 2 handicap spaces and then either, and 2 spaces that could be charging spaces.
Yes.
Okay.
Can I ask a question about the roadway rehabilitation of Ross Common, Redwood Drive, along the Common and Post Office parking lot, if we're through the other discussion?
Well, maybe we should decide on this. Joe, do we need to decide, are we okay with I guess I should say nothing conduit at this new location or conduit plus charging station, correct?
Yeah, and yeah, we just so we could get the budget set. So right now, what we do is we have 10,000. I would, if I'm hearing at least conduit, but we're just going to modify the 10,000 budget to 4,000, thinking it's a different location. Obviously, if council's interested in the charging station, we do need to hear that because that's a change. So right now, I think what I'm hearing is at least to keep conduit in, but obviously we changed to a new cost because of the location. But I would like to hear then if that's not true, or is there 3 in favor of putting in the charging station and then obviously upping to the cost of the charging station cost?
So, I mean, certainly everyone's okay. It sounds like everyone's fine with the conduit. Or do people want to go farther than that? I mean, as I said, I'm fine with the conduit for now, especially because of the parking issues. Beach, you're shaking your head. That must mean you're fine with the conduit for now, but not the charging station. And Elizabeth Breckus, your position?
Yep.
Conduit, no station. So, and then, I mean, it's not fair, even though that's 3, at least to ask the others. Julie, I know you had said you would go with the whole thing, and Bill, your position would be?
I would go with either. I'm actually thinking about a carpool lane type arrangement where sometimes it could be used only for charging and sometimes open to everybody, like carpool lanes. Just to start off and see if it's not used that much, then it's more symbolic, isn't it? I mean, but if it's used a lot, maybe there's a difference. It's just something I was thinking about as a way not to necessarily take away a parking space, but get started on this and see how it goes. What am I saying? I guess at least the conduit, but if there were support for actually putting in a charging station, I'd go for that too. I wonder if there aren't alternatives where a supplier pays for it, but we have to charge market prices and they get most of it. It's sort of like a laundromat in an apartment house. The actual owners of the apartment houses don't pay anything. They actually get some of the revenue and the rest goes to the company that puts in the washing machine. I don't know whether that alternative is available for these kinds of EV charging stations.
Thank
I'm
you.
not sure I understand, Bill. Are you talking about the cost of the electricity itself when you charge the vehicle?
Well, I'm talking about the cost of the installation. Are there companies that will pay for the cost of the installation? Give the town either nothing that they receive or a small percentage of what they receive. Bonaire is apparently putting in a huge area of charging stations. I just read something that there was no cost to Bonaire. And I wondered if there weren't companies that are picking up the cost of the installation because they want the revenue, sort of like a gas station.
Mm-hmm. We can look into that. And I want to interject here too. I'm just looking on, so TAM is in the current cycle of a $3,000 reimbursement for a single level 2 charger with per charging head. So if we put a single stand with 2 charging heads, we get $6,000 back. So that's we get about a 30% rebate. I would need to apply for that by June 30th, 2021. So it'd be good to make the decision now. These cycles come at least every other year. And I think there's plenty of money. I mean, we can act now, but I think we could also, depending on council's desire, we could wait it for another cycle to get those grant funds to install one of these things.
Well, it sounds like at the moment we have a majority who would like to go ahead with the conduit that's budgeted at $4,000. And then obviously if the conduit is in, then it becomes a topic for the future. When do we want to move ahead with the rest of it? But I think for now, that was the consensus, Joe.
Okay, is it something we want to bring back in? I guess it's easier to decide now versus doing a May, June, since we're already discussing it. So if it is the conduit, we're good, but I wouldn't, unless you want us to bring another item back to talk again in May or June about it, given the grants June 30th. Now is really, it would be a good time to get the full direction. Is that where we're landing?
I mean, I didn't get the sense that the 5 or 10,000 installation fee is the stumbling block. I've got the sense that it's how much do we need to take up these parking spaces in downtown Ross when virtually all Ross residents have their own private charging station. And so even though it is symbolic, it's not a benefit to our town. I mean, it's not a direct benefit to town residents. So Julie, you were going to speak, and then Elizabeth, you still have your hand up. Are you still speaking, or did you just not take your hand down?
Yeah, I just had another.
Okay, so Julie and then Elizabeth.
Well, I was going to ask people what their hesitation, their reservation is. Is it the budget? Because it looks like we're taking the budget from 10,000 down to 4,000 with the relocation of the location for the charging station, and then we could get a grant of $3,000. So that's reducing the cost of the install by quite a bit in terms of the budget. So I was just going to ask what people's hesitation is. Is it the parking or is it the money?
I mean, mine had been parking, but Elizabeth Breckus and then Beach.
Well, I think that the point is a good one, that I didn't, we got that additional information that we could get some funding, which is helpful. But mine is definitely parking. Like, number one, if we don't need 2 handicap parking spaces there, which I see empty all the time, then let's reduce it regardless of what we do it to 1, because I just don't see, I see way more handicapped parking spaces than I see use. And number 2, if we're going to put electricity there, we need to chase down whether or not we are providing that, whether that electricity to a handicapped space can only be used by a handicapped electric car, because then we're really further reducing the use of that. And I wouldn't recommend that. And then the other part is, I thought Bill's comment was a really good one about, could we do something like carpool lanes? Because it's really true that, I think that it's not that hugely beneficial. And when we get back to full-time picking up kids and everything else, every space counts. Since I've been on council, we created 2 20-minute spots around the bikes area. We've got a parklet. We have, we eliminated 1 spot in another location, on the Eddy side, but just before. And so all of that, and now we have a drop-off lane for Ross Preschool. And it really is a nightmare. And I've asked year after year to find out why the post office has 3 designated spots, and there's only 2 people at best ever parking in them. And is it required by the lease, and can we pull that? But it is a parking issue. And so it's not a budget issue. And I think I could totally get there on the idea of putting it in. And I think even if it's more symbolic than useful to the residents, but I could see it being useful. I would really think that that's still what we should do. I just want to create flexibility for people trying to park in that area.
Thank you. Beach?
Well, there's an issue that's always concerned me, and maybe I misunderstand something. But my understanding is there are 2 or maybe 3 different levels of charging stations that you can have. There's slow charging and there's fast charging, just to make the terms simple. The slow charging requires a car to be in that spot for a long time. Obviously, putting in the slow charging charger is cheaper than putting in the fast charging charger. But all of this with the potential that there may be some in years soon to come, there may be some improvements in how fast you can charge. is my reason for suggesting that we just put in the power now and wait on putting in an actual charging station until because it's impractical. If it takes overnight to charge a car in one of those spots, that's not practical. And we shouldn't do that, because somebody will get in there at 9 in the morning and nobody else will be able to use it for the rest of the day. I don't think we want that. So I think we ought to just put in the power for now. And when we're really ready to put in, and we should not put in a charging station now because of potential changes in the in how you can do it, improvements in how fast they can be done. So I'm in favor of just putting in the charging station. Just putting in the power for now.
So I think, Joe, I think that's the consensus. I don't know that there's a reason to bring it back in a month or two. I think, give it a year, see where things are with cars, with parking, with projects, and then we can bring it up again. Are we ready to put in charging stations? Yes or no?
Got the direction, thank you. And so I think have that topic, so we'll put in the conduit at $4,000 into the budget.
One other thing, Joe, since we do have this hard stop, are there other topics that we are going to want to discuss? Because it's always great to do the discussing, before we're pressed for time, because it's nice to have the time to discuss. So do we have other things on our agenda today that are discussions amongst the 5 of us, or is it more just going through with questions?
There's at least going to be one more in general government, which is going to be the first department up about council coming back into the chambers and what that could mean.
Okay, so that'll be early. Good, thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor. Could I just raise one other topic going back to what we just talked about? I don't want to delay our discussion, but there was an item that Joe mentioned about $110,000 for vegetation management. And my question, Joe, is that enough? Should we be devoting more to that, given what it looks like we're unfortunately going to be facing this summer, which is extremely high fire danger?
And a very good question. The 110s for both defensible space inspections and for the vegetation removal. That being said, that's our local funds. There's also discussion with, there's an MWPA, there's this part called core funding. And one of they're working on where core funding, once we have environmental analysis done, it's going to be a lot in the hinterlands, like the MNWDs on the hillsides. For now, they're still getting environmental. So it's chances are they're going to do some of that core funding also in the local jurisdictions, say in Ross Valley. I do have scheduled a request from Fire Chief Weber just yesterday, requested to come to council this coming meeting, May 13th, to talk about the MWPA and the vegetation management and projects specifically. So we will have an item discussing more, or it's more of a presentation, but obviously we can add a discussion because they have to know for funding for this coming year's budget. So, but that's a good question, but is it enough? But we'll have the chief here in the next 2 weeks to help with that. And we'll also know what the funding, the core funding, and Councilmember McMillan, my guess is you have information.
And let me just make a comment. When the way this works is I can't see everybody's face on the tiles, but I can see everybody's panelist if you raise your hand with the little, the little icon. So be sure to raise your hand with the little icon, because then, Joe or we can see everybody that way. And we can't, you can't see all the council members in the videos. But Julie, I saw you both ways. Now your hand.
Joe and Elizabeth, I was thinking it might also be great to invite Mark Brown, who's the executive officer of the MWPA. He's been going to various council and other jurisdiction meetings explaining what MWPA's priorities are right now, which is from the home out. So the real push right now is educating homeowners on how to harden your home and defensible space while the agency tries to navigate as best it can all the CEQA issues for large vegetation management projects. And he could explain that with Jason.
Yeah, so I will look to get, see if Mark could come with Jason to the next. council
Awesome,
meeting.
thank you.
Okay. Beach, did you raise your hand?
No, I don't see any hands.
Oh, no, I know it was a
Oh, his
physical.
real hand,
Yeah.
not his virtual hand. Okay.
So other topics, so. And Mayor, you were asking if there's other general topics. So the other one is that I know of is that coming of the council chambers, but that will be actually the next slide. It'll be in the department of that next slide.
Good.
Okay, and Elizabeth, I think you were starting to ask a question about the Redwood Drive or Roscommon Rehabilitation Project.
Right, I just was wondering what that was and if we could get a brief description of it.
Sure. So we're looking at the section of Roscommon between Lagunitas and Redwood, this right along the park there. We would grind off an inch or so of the old pavement and put in a brand new pavement, restripe the lane and the parking stalls along Roscommon there. On Redwood, pretty much the same. We'd grind off some of the old pavement and put a brand new layer of new pavement there between the knuckle and Roscommon. Would make it nice for the outdoor dining event as well. And then the parking lot behind the post office is somewhat the same thing, but we also have those concrete walkways that are falling apart along the perimeter of the parking lots. We'd like to remove those and maybe put in some sort of, we could even look at some pattern concrete, even expanding the asphalt area and maybe moving some of the walkways over closer to the fence that runs along the creek and give us a little bit more room there. But staff still wants to do a little field walk and tie down what we want to do there in the parking lot. But essentially it's your standard grind and overlay type roadway projects.
Is there no opportunity with respect to the pathway along Frederick, leading to Frederick Allen for us to tie that into any flood district project?
As far as aesthetics are concerned and materials and that sort of thing, I'm not sure I understand.
From a funding standpoint.
From a funding standpoint, so the limits of the flood control district's project is right there at the demarcation between the parking lot and Frederick Allen Park. So we could ask, I mean, the flood control would have to, that money is for flood control projects. So I'm not sure they'd want to extend any funding beyond the Frederick Allen Park into the post office, but we can definitely match materials and locations and alignments and that sort of thing. But funding in the parking lot part of the pathway, I don't think that's an option, but I can definitely run it by them.
Okay, and then what about when we do this restriping of Roscommon, can we look at whether or not there's an ability to increase parking in town? And then the other question I had is, were we not, it was my recollection that at one point we talked about whether we would look and see if a roundabout on Shady, Allen and Lagunitas and Roscommon, that thing was viable. Is that not where we landed on that?
If I'm not sure we got a full council consensus on whether we wanted to do that, redo that study there. It would take a traffic study and some expenditures and some direction from council to pursue that. Some initial sketches were done several years ago, so there is a basis for that. But if council would like us to go in that direction, we can definitely pursue that. And regarding the parking along Roscommon, when I get the plans back for review from our consultant, Mo Engineering, I do want to look at any opportunities to add additional parking or reconfigure the angle of the parking to maybe stuff one or two in there. That is definitely on my radar and staff to take a look at that. Before we restripe it, we want to maximize parking.
Especially on that area, you know, of Ross Common between Lagunitas and Redwood. It's quite a wide road, and you know, on one side of the street, the cars are parked at a 45-degree angle. And I always wondered why they aren't parked at a 45-degree angle on the opposite side to, you know, to increase the number of parking places. I mean, if that's possible, that would be a really quick and easy way to get some more parking. Right now, it's all parallel parking on the side of the post office.
If we have the lane width, we can realign the lanes within the wide portion of Ross Common, as you mentioned, and look at something like that. That's a good point. So we want to, when we get these plans back and they've laid out the striping, I can go back and forth with Mo Engineering and see if we can maximize either side of the street.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions on any of these items? And then my other question is going to be, when we want to have a break? We're about to start into each department and department head going through their budgets and then through all the other funds outside the general fund. So council, just let me know when is the appropriate time that people do want to break, but should we continue?
Let's do at least the next section that requires discussion, and then maybe
Okay.
break after that. I mean, it won't be that long a meeting. It's only going to be till 12:30 anyway.
Okay. So going, and here I'll bring you to your tab. So here we'll have each department head, and I happen to be the first one, so given general government. But if you go to tab H, page 11 in your binder, is where the actual general government budget, the line item information is. I'm just going to highlight overall. The general government budget's up 5.6% from the previous budget. Wages and benefits are 4.2% higher in total, with the PERS and workers' comp having the largest percent increases. And the reason I'm mentioning and PERS runs through all departments. I think if I recall, overall, I think the PERS was about a 7% throughout the whole. It'll be different percentages in different agencies, but departments. Workers' comp, we've had at least 2 years of declining rates. Well, this year we had a couple cases and now we're seeing a 20% plus increase. So after 2 years of decreases, we are now town-wide. I'm pointing out in general government, but that runs through various departments. In the general government budget, outside services are 4.8% higher than the prior year budget. This year, there is not a payment to the Community Homeless Fund for the first time, I think at least since 2016 or so. They said they had enough funding sources for the coming fiscal year. And this is another one that runs through the whole town. And this is where property and liability insurance, we're having a 0% increase town-wide. Of our pool of about 28, 29 government entities in the Bay Area, our pool average increase was 25%. To one of our agencies in our pool, that was, they got a 50% increase. Or actually, I think 2 got 50% increases. Property and liability insurance is exploding. Now, the reason ours is 0%, we, knock on wood, have not had a paid claim of property or liability or any type of claim in a significant number of years. I think actually 6 Redwood was probably the last fire was the last paid claim. But insurance, just so you know, we're at 0%, and that's a great place. And there was only one other entity near us of our 28. But you look at the cases of liability on roadway type things, and Now you have also ransomware on computers. You have case judgments, and then you have the property side, the natural disasters, fires. And I'm just saying, this is an area in the future, property and liability. We have done good in keeping claims down. Obviously, at some point, but that's keeping our costs down. But overall, our pool, and it's hard to get excess insurance. The cost of buying insurance over $5 million for an incident is getting tougher and tougher for the pools, and try and buy now case judgments have been getting larger. So just pointing out, we're in good position, our budget on this, but this is the area. And overall, our property and liability insurance is $90,000 of our budget, but that could obviously change in future years depending on if claims come in. Other item, miscellaneous expenses have increased in this year's budget of $20,000 relating to potential town future expenses. And one of those I'm going to have Linda talk right now is the case of our council chambers. And Linda, if you want to lead this conversation.
Sure. So their conversation has started between all the agencies. City clerks and city managers have been talking, and as COVID restrictions start to ease, people are looking at returning to in-person council meetings. And what will that look like? And so Joe and I met with the Michael Eisenmenger from the Community Media Center of Marin to see what options we are looking at. To complicate matters, there's also new legislation in the works, AB 339, which has quite a bit of things in there. I'm not going to go into all of them. Maybe Joe wants to speak to some of them, but one of them is that agencies will need to be able to continue to provide their meetings through some sort of internet service or telephonically. So in other words, we've been on Zoom now for a little over a year, and we're going to need to figure out how we're going to continue to have that service so that people that want to be at home and still participate live in meetings can do so. So the way it looks like a lot of cities are going to go is they're going to have one computer that's dedicated to Zoom that would be set up through our audio system in town hall. And there would be a camera that would be in the back of the room. That's one option. And so people could be watching the meeting from home. And if they want to raise their hand and speak and comment during public comment, they can. And their message would come through in our audio in the room. The meeting would still then be videotaped, and that would still be an option. The other option is that we have more than one camera and a video operator running it, which is what many cities are currently doing. I think Ross and Belvedere are the only two cities now that don't offer live streaming. But by default, because of COVID, we all now offer live streaming, whether we wanted to or not. So I guess we want to just get the council's view of, what would you like to see? It looks like we're going to have to offer something. We don't have an option if this bill passes. And currently our attorney believes it is going to pass. Is that correct, Joe? You said you talked to Ben and he seems to think that this is going to happen and we're going to have to be ready for it. Now, the good news is that when we talked about doing video streaming back in, I think it was like 2012, the council was against it. They didn't want it. It was going to cost actually a lot of money. Well, now it doesn't cost. Apparently there's something called a PEG grant that the media center offers. And so they would put in all the services for free. They do the wiring and bring in the equipment. It wouldn't cost us anything. The only thing we would end up paying for is a video operator during the meeting that we would pay for by the hour. So our costs would be kind of minimal. and we could still provide video, and people could still be at home if they wanted to, or they could come in person. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And we just wanted to take the pulse of the council and see, what you guys think about this. Because obviously, at some point, we are going to come back to in-person meetings. We don't know when that is, but we want to be prepared. And if we are going to go this route, it'll take time to get wiring and that sort of thing done. So we would need, a bit of time for planning that.
So, Bill and Beach, just a second. Linda, I have a quick question. Why would we not just do the computer and camera? Why would we hire a video operator? What is there?
Well, so we have a fixed camera. If we went the cheapest route is to just have a fixed camera in the back of the room. It would not be anybody operating it. It would be fixed. And it would be kind of boring, actually, for people at home, because the council would look really far away. They would only see the backs of the staff's heads. There wouldn't be any way to see who was really speaking. You could hear them, but you couldn't. It's really limiting when you just have one camera in the back of the room that's not moving.
Okay.
So that's the difference. We could have several cameras where you could actually see who's talking, and then there'd be a video operator set up in the back room. He wouldn't be in town hall. He'd be in a different room. But
Well, he may be, we'd have to decide if he'd be in the back behind the dais on, like, if you're at the dais, facing the dais, the left side where there's a table, or we could put him in the office behind. Obviously, we have to get the wires all to go.
Yeah, but Michael at the community center seemed to think that was doable to do that, to put him as sort of out of sight so he wouldn't be there, that'd be a distraction.
Okay, so Bill Kircher.
What is the cost of a video operator? I know when I took depositions, it was always an extra couple $1,000 for the video operator in addition to the court reporter, or maybe not a couple thousand, but it was a lot. And some of our meetings are not as long as depositions, but they go on for 3 or 4 hours. Let's hope that doesn't happen too often, but it could if we have serious.
Yeah, so the
issues.
video operators, I think was $82.50 an hour.
Oh, okay.
So not too bad.
Yeah.
But it would also count, if I call travel time to and from the meeting.
Right.
Being
So
in
another
coming
hour.
from the
San
east
Rafael.
bay. Okay.
And Beach, did you have a comment? Your hand was up, or is it down now?
It's down now.
Okay.
Well, maybe I do have something. What about the costs of these systems? The systems would be free, the installation of the systems would be free?
Yes, apparently. We were shocked to hear that because it was so different years ago. It was going to be, I think, 30 to 35,000.
Yeah.
And now they have funds available that can just come in and take care of all this for us.
Outside of, I think we pay for a computer or two.
Yeah, I mean, we already have one of the computers, so we would
Yeah.
buy one more computer, but that would be it.
Now, one of the challenges is going to be the wiring. Because of our walls, is can we get the wires to go down the wall instead of being exposed? So we'll see if, hopefully they could do it in a discreet way. He was a little concerned looking at the room and knowing how the construction is, how to run the wires without having them showing outside and dropping them through the walls. So we are going to have some potential challenges depending on how many were on the wiring.
Okay, Julie and then Elizabeth.
My view is we want to increase participation and transparency, and I don't think the added cost of the video person is significant. And, one of the silver linings of all this Zoom environment is that I think we've had many more people participating in our meetings, observing and even commenting. And I think, just having one single camera in the back and showing the back of the staff's head, that's going to look really weird, and it's not going to promote transparency. So I think we need to do everything we can to make it as easy for the residents to continue to participate.
Elizabeth Breckus.
Yeah, I mean, I feel kind of mixed because I've never really wanted to have videotaped meetings and be on this. You know, that hasn't really appealed to me. And frankly, it's very helpful as an attorney who does municipal law because I watch videos of other council meetings all the time. But I don't, what I'm confused by, so I guess I err in the fact that, you know, people have kind of spoken by participating in these meetings. And so I think that we should honor that regardless of the fact that I wish nobody was, you know, going to put me on screen for all times. But, you know, I am confused because like in Sausalito, where I've appeared many, many, many times, and in Belvedere, I just don't have a recollection of a videographer being there. They get, when I watch it back, they get us speaking, they get staff speaking, and they get the council members speaking. So there must be maybe 3 screens that then ultimately get put together to, you know, and the presentation gets put on, but I'm not sure how they do it. So I'd be curious about that because, you know, maybe we could ask. I just don't, unless I'm just so in the moment, but I have no recollection of there being, in fact, you know, a videographer in the room for any of my council.
Yeah, I don't think they need to be necessarily in the room. Sometimes they're in a closet, is what I'm told, and you don't even see them.
So I
My old jurisdiction,
I mean, to have somebody in the
separate room.
filming everything we say, to me, I'm not, I mean, I'd rather just have the camera in the back of the room and have people be able to participate that way than having somebody, you know, with a camera focused on whoever's speaking. I think that's really distracting and I think that could affect the meeting. So if somebody has to be in the council chambers filming, I'm not wild about that if a camera in the back of the room is an alternative that allows participation.
And I think the way Linda mentioned, we could put the video person, that door, that office behind, set up that and have them in effect. We could either have them in the room and that could be distracted, or we could just wire everything to the room behind there. In effect, they'd be at a table in the office right behind the.
Yeah, that would be my recommendation, is that the cameras would be set up already, fixed on the wall in different locations. And there'd be a person in the back room away from the council meeting. You would not see them. And they would be focusing on moving the cameras to where whoever was speaking. So I don't see it as, I mean, I think that's what a lot of cities are doing now. And we've always been sort of in the dinosaur age, and it might be time to come into the 21st century.
Well, this is a reasonable time now because in the past, when towns have had that, very few of them actually were broadcasting live. They just had their meetings broadcast on, you know, that community television
Right.
a week, you know, a week later, which really served no purpose. So to be doing it live where people can participate, that's a huge benefit. So that's a real reason to go ahead and do it now. So I don't
Well,
think
that's what all the cities are faced with, even though they've been broadcasting on cable. They now have to do the Zoom as well. They're all looking at the same exact thing because they want people to be able to participate from home live. And with the cable that they did before, you couldn't do that. You could watch it, but you couldn't participate from home.
Okay, Elizabeth?
Oh, I had it up before, but you know, I could go either way. I mean, I could go with your low budget idea, which I think, you know, serves the purpose of giving people, you know, the opportunity. You know, that would be fine with me as well.
Beach?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I think, given that the cost is relatively low, to have an operator so that you can present the thing a little better. If we're gonna do it, I think we should do it with an operator. And I think we could just have somebody sitting at a table in one of the back corners of the room if we don't want to wire it into into an office. And that'd be perfectly appropriate. The TAM board meets in the supervisors' chambers at the Civic Center. And there is a guy just sitting off at the side who runs the video, and it's not at all intrusive. I don't think that's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, part of me likes the low tech option, but on the other hand, we might look kind of bad if we don't have decent, quality images and sound. It's probably $6,000 a year. It's probably $500 for the video operator every meeting roughly. And the installation is basically covered. So I guess I would go for, if you don't need a camera person right in front of you filming all the time, I guess I would go for the better quality images, because that's what people are used to on Zoom. They're used to seeing your face right up front, and they can even, pin it so that they can see you super close. Let's see, looks like Bill and Julie again. So Bill, go ahead.
Okay, I would go for the video operator, simply because I think it takes some of the burden off the council, and particularly Linda, to try to coordinate all of this. But secondly, one problem, it's not just the video, it's the audio. You can have great video and not be able to hear what they're saying. And it gets complicated. I know I've watched YouTube videos I could not hear. I could see them, I couldn't hear them, even if I turned it up all the way. So I think it's worth the extra cost just to get something that's more usable or reliable.
Okay, Julie?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think people are going to be frustrated with us if we just have that tiny little camera in the back of the room showing the back of people's heads. We're going to be meeting the requirement of the law, but it's not really going to be a genuine meeting the requirement. And we don't have anything to hide. Elizabeth Breckus looks great on camera. We should go for it.
Linda, is there, what is this? What will what will the options be for a council member to join a meeting from another location if that's necessary? Is that, if you're out of town or something and you want to join, from your hotel room or something, how will that work? Will that be something that's also doable?
That's a good question. I would have to look into that and see. I know in the past we've had them call in, on our conference phone to join meetings, but I can certainly ask that question and see.
Okay. Beach.
You'd have to have a camera in the television room, in the hotel room.
Well, I don't know if you'd be required to be filmed. I mean, maybe you can still participate by audio, but we just want to be sure that at least that is an option.
I'll
Beach,
check on it.
comment? No, okay. So it sounds like there's a consensus that we would be okay to go with the cameras because it's a better quality. And I think that's all that you need. Is that right, Joe?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you,
That
Linda,
is-
for looking into this and getting us set up in the 21st century. I do think our timing is perfect because I don't think there was a reason to film our meetings to put them on TV a week later, but now there really is a reason to film our meetings.
Thank you.
Are we going to also have a makeup person?
Okay, so I got the
Wanna do a break
question.
now? Do you want to do that?
Yeah, unless there's any other questions on the general government budget.
So let's come back at 10:50.
Should we just finish this one up if there's other
There's
questions?
one more. Okay. Oh,
Do-
Julie
do-
has a comment. Sorry.
I just wondered when people think we're going to be going back into the chambers, because I know we're all missing it a lot.
The one jurisdiction, I think San Rafael, now, I think people are still weighing the COVID. San Rafael's trying to plan for September. I haven't heard yet other jurisdictions. Everybody, I think, is exploring, but that's the only one jurisdiction I've heard of a timeline at this stage.
I heard that Nevada was trying to go soon, much sooner than that.
Yeah, I've heard Nevada's wants to go as soon as they can, and they've wanted it for a long time to go. So I'm sure my guess is Nevada may be the first one.
I had heard that San Anselmo was going to try to do it really soon as well.
Right. I mean, I'm not so sure it's the sort of thing you can plan for. It's either safe or it's not, and you don't quite know until the day it becomes safe that it's considered safe in your area, and then you can decide what risks you want to take or not take. So, I mean, it's my opinion that it's still not totally safe. Not everyone's vaccinated. Students and children aren't vaccinated. There are variants there. The vaccine's 90% effective. We have a small council chamber. People are coming in and out. They're breathing the same air. And so I wouldn't be in a hurry. I would wait until there's just a general sense that it's safe. I'm not sure when that will be. That's my opinion.
I agree with that. I don't think we need to be a first on this issue. And, while I'm fully vaccinated, I have a child who's not and playing 2 contact sports. So, I think that I miss it, but I think that we should wait a little longer.
Beach?
I am in a hurry, and I think if each of us is vaccinated, the risk is low.
We miss you too, Beach.
Hmm?
Well, I mean, oh, sorry, Julie.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I just saw Mayor Bill de Blasio on the TV before this meeting started. And he is fully opening up New York City. I think it said July 1st. So I think we should, keep that in mind.
Can I ask a question? Do we, when we go back to the chambers, do we have to let people into the chambers at some capacity limit?
And we'll have to look now. The bill's dealing with post-COVID. So yeah, I think under COVID, you could set rules differently just because you're keeping it safe. Yeah, and there's definitely going to be a capacity limit until we get the free all is clear. I think right now indoor assembly in our tier we're in or going to, I think it's 50%. I think we're at 50% now, so 24 people. Remember, our capacity is only 48 in that chambers to begin with. I know when Nevada was talking about doing it, they even had the limits that how many people could get in, and to keep the limits, staff was having to leave. They had to have people coming and going to keep under the number. It was just this whole, so part of it is it just the council meeting, but how much of the public's in there at the same time versus, just doing it through the Zoom online nature.
2 comments. One is, we're talking about keeping it safe, but really what we're talking about is limiting risk. I mean, safe is staying home. Meeting together is risk. There is a risk, and the goal is to limit the risk. And with people coming and going, that might meet the sort of the letter of the law that maybe we don't have more than 24 people, but you've got more than 24 people coming in, breathing, and sharing air, so that you aren't limiting the risk in the same way that you might be if you have just a small cohort. So I think the concept is limit risk, and when do things seem kind of safe enough with COVID that we're okay to be back in? And then how do we handle the public? Because I think it'd be a shame if we have a live meeting, but we can't accommodate all of the people who want to participate. We're almost better off having everybody by Zoom rather than having some in the meeting and some by Zoom. Then how do you decide who gets to be, physically there? Or do they have more or less influence than the people participating by Zoom? So I sort of like when we go back, that it's open for everybody to our maximum capacity, or we don't bring anybody back. But I don't think we can decide right now. I feel like.
No,
still-
there's gonna be more to come, obviously, as we go COVID, and we'll watch, but what we do have is that direction to get the cameras, the multi-cameras set up. And just so you know, we'll look to run it to the back room unless that's a problem versus having the operator in the chamber. So, you know, the one thing that has changed over time, quite frankly, the technology used to take up a lot more room. At my old town hall, we had a room that was about 8 by 8, and now really it's so you can do it at a desk. And the technologies help, given our old chambers and a lack of space size to begin with, the technologies making it easier that at least you can have this operating multi-cameras with less space than before. So, and then obviously the talk about when to come back, we'll have that dialogue coming in these coming months and see. So, and as I say, the state law will go through, it's a good chance go through and, you know, may determine some of these things partially for us also. But any other general government questions? If not, we can take a break now.
Okay, well, it's 10:55. So we're kind of 8 minutes, or you guys want 10? Want to come back at 11:03 or 11:05? I say 11:03. Is that good?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, you have one more department on me before the department heads. Fire department. This is in your binder, tab I, page 13. And just so you know, the Ross Valley Fire Department JPA budget is still being developed, and the figures will not just likely be revised, they will be revised from the draft budget that's before you. So just so you know, yesterday I learned what the revision is going to be. So I'll go through this and say what will change. The fire department expenses are budgeted at 2.55 million, which is 4.9% higher than your fiscal year 21 budget. And as we mentioned, fire represents 29% of the total general fund budget. One of the line items in the budget, which is the JPA contract, I put in at 4.5% higher. Just so you know, when I did this draft, we were at 5.9%, but I knew there would be some ways to lower it, and I thought I could get it down under 4.5%. Yesterday, we had a meeting. The cost will be about $10,000 higher right now than I'm showing in the budget. So we're expecting to be slightly higher than my third bullet point, the 4.5% higher will be slightly higher than that. I think it's going to be like 4.8%. The vehicle replacement fund is going up 4%, which ends up at $80,000 a year. A reason for the JPA cost increase, some of its salaries and benefits. Another part is dispatch contract. All the fire departments in the county get their dispatch services, and a lot of the city police departments through the county sheriff office, and the sheriff's raising the dispatch cost by 17% next year. In addition, there's also some technology. They're changing the internet service to each of the stations to get better service and better resiliency and power shutdowns. And there's a one-time expense there. And so overall, expect where I say that it's going to increase in the third bullet. The contract cost of 4.5% will probably be 4.8%. It's $10,000 higher than I'm showing here. And we kind of talked the last bullet point. If you see, the budget includes two line items for $55,250 for wildfire prevention program. this is related to the defensible space expenses and the vegetation management. And there may be some little money to do grants for residents, but we got to see where we're at. And we will have, as I said, at least Fire Chief Weber next meeting. We'll see if Mark Brown could also come to talk more. So are there any questions on fire department? Okay, not seeing any, we'll move to the next department. And that will be police and Police Chief Pata.
Good morning, how are you? So, does this thing work? Okay. So, as you can see, largely, I'm still getting around figuring out this organization and trying to make it work as smoothly as we can do here. The costs, it's up 2.7% from the last budget year, but I don't see any major expenses at this point. I'm looking at things like there's some things that have to be replaced here, some things we have to do to accommodate the law. I'm focusing pretty heavily on training for de-escalation and transparency and leadership things in this next coming year. So that's a lot of where my budget is going to be looking at least in the training side. And then there's obvious increases that happen every year, like with dispatch. We save some money by not having the task force in this coming fiscal. But that's kind of where we're at. We have had some overtime increases. A lot of that has to do with COVID, and then also some workers' comp issues. But aside from that, the department looks pretty smooth. There's not a lot of huge changes or a lot of huge things going on here, and kind of where we're at right now.
If there's questions for the chief, oh, and I forgot to mention, this is tab in your binder. This is tab I, page 13 is the police budget.
Julie?
Thank you, Chief. Just a question on the workers' comp. It's a really big increase. They're almost 37%. I'm just wondering what's going on with that.
So,
Do you want me to take? Yeah.
yeah, you're probably. I'm a rookie to it. I'm getting up to speed on my people right now, but Joe probably has the best inside track on it.
Overall, this is as I mentioned earlier, when we were in the general government, we've had 2 years of decreases, and townwide, we got a 20% plus increase, and we allocate it to the departments. But there have been, in the past year, we've had some worker comp cases, so it's been experience, and obviously then it's going to reflect in rates. Any other questions for police? Okay. We'll move to the next department, and this is planning and building. It's tab K, page 16 in your binder. Planning and building directors, Streeter.
Hello, Mayor Robbins and members of the council. So the budget for planning and building has not changed substantially from what it looked like last year. Just the allocation of funds in different areas has increased and decreased. Just like you'll see across all departments, a lot of the changes in wages and benefits, but also outside services has been on the decline over the past couple of years. And as was mentioned previously in this presentation, a lot of those services that were previously sent out of house, we're now able to do in-house. So the main one being plan check, where previously all of our plan checks were done by a third party. Now most of them are in-house. We're getting a large number of our permit applications are for things like photovoltaics, generators, and other mechanical units. Those we can all do in-house pretty quickly with quick turnaround. It's really only the really large projects, anything that has structural review or complex mechanical equipment like elevators, things like that, we send out to a third party. So we are seeing significant savings there. Also, a big increase this year is planning consultant work. So earlier in the presentation, when we talked about new projects and programs, there are several that we're taking on, including the improvements to the Ross Common. We also have some use permits that we're processing. And so things like the Climate Action Plan update, there's various programs that we're undertaking. Most of these, a good amount of the funds are covered through either grants or through county-wide general services, things like that, or through applicants paying the cost recovery. So while the budget is higher, we're not seeing a big dip in our actual town revenue funds to meet it, because those funds are being delivered from outside sources. We also have just another program that a big chunk of funds this year is going towards scanning services. We did this with our building plans. We digitized everything. Right now, our planning side of things, most of these are paper documents that are still in folders that are taking up space over in our Public Works courtyard building. And so, so digitizing those would be very important for the ease of looking things up, but also to make sure that we don't lose those should something happen to the paper copies. Our annual license is not changing with Trackit. That's our permit processing software, but we are expanding our use of it, trying to have a lot more online capability. There's a segment of it called eTrackit that allows for applications to be filed electronically and for permit status to be looked up electronically without having to come down to town hall. So that's been very useful over the last year, and we're trying to expand those services. And lastly, a portion of the operating fund for planning is coming out of our general fund, our general plan update fund. Basically, anything any of the programs that we're implementing that are working towards general plan goals, especially housing goals, we can use those general plan funds to meet those. And we are going to be undertaking a general plan update in the coming years. So that's going to be the big expenditure. But right now, we are getting a little bit of revenue from that source. And if there are any specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions for Patrick? Thank you. I guess we can go to the next topic then, Joe.
Sorry, I was muted. The next department's Public Works, and Department Head Rich Simonich to go through that. And this is tab L, page 17 in your budget document.
Thanks, Joe. Hello, Mayor Robbins, council members. So the Public Works Department expenditures coming up for 2021. The budget at 8% more than the prior budget. Includes staffing for the 3 positions, which is similar to last year. So one of the causes, well, let's go item by item. So the wages and benefits slightly higher due to your cost of living expenses. Some decrease in these costs over the past few years due to reorganization and reclassification of some of our staff, between Robert Macario leaving and Anthony taking over the head of our road maintenance and park maintenance position. Building and land maintenance costs 13% higher due to the significant increase the Ross Common maintenance budget to $85,000. These are offset by the $20,000 we received from the Measure A Park funds. and the 22,000 from Ross School. The street and tree maintenance costs are budgeted at the same amount as the prior budget. So yeah, we saw about a 31% increase in the park maintenance costs for Ross Common. We've done a lot of work out there. We have a new contractor, a new landscape contractor with some expanded services at Ross Common, and they are also providing maintenance at Frederick Allen Park and the new 6 Redwood parcel as well as part of their maintenance contract. So, and as you can see, the Ross Common is looking very green, thanks a little bit to the reclassification of the use during COVID, but also a very aggressive maintenance program by a new company, Cagwin, who was brought on under Mike Armstrong when he was here. So that's really it for the Public Works Department Operating Fund. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Rich, why does it say for the Ross Common County and Marin Measure A Parks? What's that Measure A Parks in there?
That is actually a grant money that we receive, and Elizabeth, our accountant, might be able to expand on that a little bit more, and as well as Joe.
You know, that's a good catch, Doc, Mayor. We should probably, I mean, the reality is it's park maintenance, Ross Commons. There's a revenue, they pay for $22,085, but we should probably, this is a remnant of the past. In Public Works, we used to only have a portion of the budget that was in recreation, and we moved it. The reason the numbers were lower in 1919, 1920s, we split the cost out. Most of the cost used to actually happen in recreation. Now we've moved all the costs starting with this year's budget into Public Works.
Yeah.
But we should just delete that. Now it is all the park maintenance Ross Common, so we'll delete the note.
Okay.
It's a good catch, and so it should just read park maintenance dash Ross Common. As I said,
Right.
previous years, it was only the Measure A component, but now it's the entire Ross Common.
Thank you.
Thanks.
No, thanks for the catch too, because I like getting these documents cleaner.
I don't really understand what just happened, what Elizabeth was saying, and then what you guys were saying. Are you saying that the $22,000 isn't reflected in the actual budget, even though it's mentioned in here, or what?
That the label under park maintenance Ross Common
Yeah.
has that, and then it says County of Marin Measure A Parks. There's no reason to have that notation here anymore, so we're going to delete it. Before, only the Measure A part was happening in Public Works for the most part, outside of special, because we had it over in Recreation Department. You'll see when we get to Recreation Department, they used to have a portion. You would split the cost of the Ross Common. Now all of it is associated with Public Works with this year's budget.
Okay, but how come that 22,000 is going to be over, or there's a 20,000 measure,
Yeah,
Marin County Measure A Park funds and 22 from Ross School, and both of them are going to be on the Ross Rec budget sheet?
no. Well, this is only the expenses. Those are going to be seen. You can see the revenues in the revenue line items. So if you go to page 10, page 9 and 10 of the revenues, they list those items out. So in effect, this is an expense budget. It doesn't need to say the revenue source. When we get into other funds, it will have revenues and expenses. So if, for example, on page 10, if you look, they have 2 lines under Public Works revenue on page 10. It says Ross School dash Ross Common Maintenance under Public Works, in the budget for next year's $21,800. And the Measure A money is probably showing up, that's actually showing up under intergovernmental revenue on page 9 to 20,000. So those numbers are in the revenues. So those are two of the funding sources. So in effect, that 20,000 and 21,800 rounded to 22,000 are paying for the Ross maintenance.
Okay, and then how come in 1819 it was 88 and 1920 it was 64? Were those revenues or expenditures?
Which page are you on?
I'm now on 19, where it says park maintenance, Roscommon, County Marin
Yeah,
measuring.
those are the costs that happen in recreation department. So those are all expenses. Yeah. So, yeah, so this is expenses. And so what was happening in 1819, actually the Roscommon cost a lot. We had a ton of rehabilitation going on that year. That we had major changes of our irrigation system, watering system. And so there was cost that year of $88,000, and recreation and in public works, you also had 37,000. So that year actually spent 125. A lot of that was capital, fixing systems. And then in fiscal year 20, it was still, it added between the two departments still at 90,000.
Okay.
But now it's all going to be consolidated into public works. So we're not going to have that. You have to go between two departments to find it.
Thank you.
Good questions. It is a little confusing. Hence one of the reasons to go get it all in one department. Any other questions for Public Works Operating Fund?
I don't see any hands.
So moving to recreation, which is tab M, page 19, and recreation manager Kastutz.
Hello, hi guys. So I'll just go quickly through each spot here. So sorry, they're vacuuming over there. So basically, Joe had already mentioned this, but with recreation, our expenditures are very tied to revenue. We're kind of a unique department in that way, I guess. So our planning of this is looking at it in hopes that with COVID, guidelines will, get less strict. We'll be able to add more kids, but we're also looking at it in a conservative way. We don't think, June 15th is going to come and everything is going to be open and we're going to be able to go back to pre-COVID time. So it's kind of that in-between space that we're looking at right now and anticipating for. So you can see that the expenses are budgeted at 8.4% higher the previous year, and that's directly related to the revenue that we're expecting to bring in. Same with wages. We, as Joe had mentioned, we cut back on our hours to in response to COVID and our decrease in programming. And with the increase in programming coming up, we're hoping to be able to increase our hours again. And then the outside services, so that's mostly looking at independent contractors that we use. So the idea is that, again, we'll be able to increase our programming with these independent contractors, and then we'll have more program expenses as well in relation to the increase in programming. And that's where that big 27% higher number is coming from. And then special events, we are hopeful that we'll be able to, have the town dinner, things like that. And then also some more new, hopefully, events that we had kind of been looking at before COVID hit that we've been exploring both in partnership with Ross Auxiliary and then just on our own. So that's where that 15,000 budget number is for special events and activities. And then 4th of July also, which I don't know. We have to see as we get closer what that will look like. I don't think it will look like the old days this year, but maybe some version. And then the last line there is the 10,000 long-term facility lease we pay to Ross School every year. That's a fixed cost that we pay, or a fixed expense that we pay every year to Ross School that doesn't change. That 10,000 number is there. So that's where we're at. I think with the recreation department, we are so tied to what's going on with COVID. It's one of the harder ones to know exactly what's going to happen, but we're hopeful that, you know, with the bigger cohort sizes, which they've already allowed, staff can now work with more than one cohort, that we're going to be moving in a positive direction. So it's exciting, and looking forward to seeing, you know, more kids out there running around and have a little bit more of normalcy going on this upcoming year. So happy to answer any questions.
There, Elizabeth Breckus.
Is there any policy? I mean, I don't know how this is working, or is there any policy around, you know, requiring vaccinations for staff? And are people looking at, like, are there going to be vaccination requirements, for example, for ballroom dancing, or, you know, things that
Yeah.
are people talking about stuff like that?
Yeah, I've on the last Zoom call I had with the county, it's kind of, you can't require staff to get vaccines. You can strongly encourage it, but legally you can't require them to. Most of our staff have been vaccinated, most of our instructors, not all of them, which is good. So, you know, I'm happy about that. As far as, you know, the kid thing, we don't know when that's going to come and what that's going to look like. And yeah, ballroom dancing with 100 kids in the gym, I don't know. I'm not sure if that's going to be happening this year, but yeah. And then as far as checking people, if people have been vaccinated or not, you know, for like event type things, it's this kind of gray area. The county is not, they're saying that each jurisdiction can come up with the plan of how they want to do that. So it's because with events, you can technically have more people if they're vaccinated, but then how do you check each person? It's a really complicated thing, especially here where we don't have an area that's closed in where you can, you know, have people access one at a time and check their vaccine card and have a ticket they buy, because we don't have a fenced in type area like that. So for us, I'm not sure exactly how that would work. I think if, you know, for event type things, we would have to stick to the lower number, which I think it's 100 or something. But I don't, you know, that's to be seen as well. But instead of having to try to ask each person to prove their vaccination, it's really a tricky thing legally and then just logistically as well.
Are there any other questions for Gretchen? Oh, yes, Julie.
Thank you. I'm just wondering where the debt service for the long-term facility lease with Ross School appears on the expenditure page. I can't seem to see it.
It's, where did it go? I think it's the,
It's the last item almost. There's debt service, interest and principal. So if you go on page 20.
Oh, yeah, I was looking on 19.
Oh, I didn't see the other page. Thank you.
It is.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Well, thank you, Gretchen.
Thank you.
So that brings us to general fund capital expenses. And there's two tabs. As we said, we have a minor part. This is for stuff in tab. Part of capital expenditures is tab N, page 21. And this is more of the smaller stuff, the technology equipment. And this year we have $21,000 in technology equipment and $5,000 of furniture. The bigger amount of capitals is in our facilities fund. And that is tab O, page 22. And the big items here are the start of the master plan for the town facilities master plan. And we've budgeted 200,000 for that. Ross Common restoration, we've budgeted 425,000 of that. Some of that's part of the consultant contract and then the capital. Now, whether we would finish in time to build all the capital, rehabilitate the common in this coming fiscal years, probably pushing it. I haven't budgeted that way, but the reality is it'll probably go over 2 fiscal years, the construction. We mentioned the Ross Common new wells, and then miscellaneous improvements and ADA improvements at Town Hall, and the public safety building, and the undergrounding for the Rule 20A, which is the town's project. We're budgeting 50,000 related to the design. That would be paid for from, we've accumulated, I think, about $290,000 of PG&E Rule 28 credits. So that will be related to the design. And obviously this last electric vehicle charging station, we're going to alter that to $4,000 for the conduit. So this is the bigger list is at that page tab O. So this is the facilities fund. And if you look at tab O, you'll see that fund balance where we talked about that we're now about 6 million. You look at the bottom line, which is estimated fund balance end of year, and it's showing at the end of this year about 6,057,000, about the same amount expected at the end of the budget year. Any questions on our general fund capital facilities in these budget pages?
So I don't see any raised hands.
Can I ask a quick question? For the Ross Common Park improvements, are we already underway with the staff, or a consultant plan with that?
Yeah, well, Gates started, we've hired Gates and Associates. They met with staff, and the next month or two, they'll start the community portion of it. So they've been on site. We kind of walked through the common with them, told them the history, gave them the documents. So they're at the getting background, and we'll start the engagement part. And there will be, I believe that there's probably like 3 community meetings and council meetings related to it. Engagement is the plan.
That seems like a lot. I'm just wondering if we wouldn't want to pare it down to 1 and then just have it go through our ADR group.
Part of it's a workshops though, to hear the different, because you're going to have a lot of people. I mean, obviously we want to hear from a broad segment of the whole entire community, you know, from the youth and the families and then the age friendly, because then I know just even talking to age friendly before they have some ideas too, what they'd like to see. So I think you're just going to have and obviously there's sports groups, there's a school, just making sure we're hearing from the various groups.
Dog owners.
Dog owners, and that's definitely going to be one of the topics is the dogs. And it's also going to be the use of the post office area lawn. You know, we told them it's not just the common there, it's across the street too. And also like connectivity to the downtown, you know, it is gateways kind of, you know, our downtown, small downtown, but obviously trying to get the socialization and community connections between that and the post office.
But if you sorry.
I was going to say one thing for this project is I think it has to be clear what it is we're doing, because I know I mentioned it to one person And he said, why are you doing anything? The common's just fine. What does it need? So I think that there has to be a clear reason why we're reassessing and spending money and doing anything other than landscaping maintenance, because I don't know that people know that it even needs anything.
Well, what it definitely needs, and because we could just fix things in kind, but if you ever want to change things, now's the time to do it. For example, the pathways are not in good condition. They need major rehabilitation. That hedge around down on part from the post office down to the corner at Redwood and along Redwood needs to come out. And the question is, do you replace it or do something different? Do you alter where the pathway is located? Do you create seating area? We've heard a number of people saying there needs to be more seating areas out there. So I think it's the opportunity to change how we're going to have to fix some things, but if you're going to move it, now's the time you'd move it.
Elizabeth?
Well, I just think that number one, I'm a little concerned that we're going to get off and running with, presenting it to all these different groups, and then they think they're going to actually have a way in, and we may disagree. I wonder if we shouldn't first scope this thing at the council level before we, put it out to a bunch of people when their desires, wants, and everything else isn't really what we feel is needed.
I would think, though, we need to hear from the community of what people think the needs and uses are. Obviously, the common's well used now, but and I'll let Patrick weigh in too. But to hear from the residents and the groups, because we've had staff heard from a number of people over the years too. I'll let Patrick, who's working directly with the consultant, provide your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add that, that's the purpose of having such an engagement heavy process for this plan, is that we want to find out, what is working with the common. So what things don't need to change, and then, where does the community want to see improvements taking place? And so it's not that we're preparing a plan that's then going to go in front of council, and that we're presenting this plan to all these different groups. What we're doing is reaching out to these different groups, getting their feedback, and trying to put together a plan based on that input. And so the format that these workshops take place could be through council, or they could be, separate standalone community engagement. We really want to just reach out to as many different segments of the community as we can. And so it's not so much putting together a plan and then presenting it. It's working with the community to actually prepare that plan, and then all taking a look at it at the end product and saying whether or not we think that's reflective of the community as a whole.
Julie, thank you.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Okay, I was just hoping that in this work, it's also encompassing Kittle Park, whatever, the place across the street from Town Hall.
Yeah, we did last week, took a walk with the consultant that's working on putting together this plan, and a big part of how we're looking at the common is that it is a gateway, and a part of that gateway is how does it interact with the other publicly owned spaces. And so that Kittle Park space, we did visit there, and that's definitely going to be considered as part of this process.
Great, thank you.
Again, I would just make sure that our approach as we're doing this outreach is something like, are there improvements you would like to see in the common, not we are redoing the common. And I say that in part because, our parcel tax is coming up, and if we're spending $500,000 redoing the common and not everyone's on board that it even needs anything, we're gonna struggle for votes for that. So I think how it's presented is really important. And to me, the spin would be, are there improvements that would be helpful in Ross Common, not, we're planning a major renovation, because I'm not hearing a lot of people saying this needs to be majorly renovated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. And so as we develop this engagement, I think the messaging is going to be very important. And I think that's a really good perspective on it. Is we're asking the community, what works and what could be improved, rather than saying, hey, we're redoing the common. So I think, yeah, as more of an inquiry than a redevelopment, I think is a good way to approach it.
Beach, thank you.
How much of this budgeted expense is to get this community input?
So the professional services agreement that we're working on is under 50,000.
150,000 to find out what people want.
Under 50,000.
And then the construction can be done for the remaining part of the 425?
Well, that's the whole idea of a master plan, is that we can have some things that we can implement in the immediate following the plan, and then other things that as funding becomes available, we would incorporate them. So,
Okay, so the 425 does not represent what this cost is really going to be.
It's 50, the consultant's 50,000, 25,000 is in already this year's budget, and $25,000 is in a part of the 425. Construction for now, what we have out there is 400,000. And of that, we have a proposition grant from the state for 177,000. And one improvement we definitely need to do, if you walk that pathway, needs to be renovated. That is not in good condition. So, and the question is, do you renovate it in place or do you move it in places? So that's part of it.
and to the mayor's point, we don't know exactly what the scope of improvements will be. We know some things that have to be improved. So it could be that the community feedback is very lofty and we have all these large infrastructure improvements that we'd want to make. Or we might say that the common is pretty effective as it is, and there's some small changes, and so that number is smaller. So it's really preparation of this plan is the first step to figure out the future costs.
Elizabeth Breckus?
I guess I'm just really hesitant to go off and running with, a $50,000 consultant. I mean, I can understand in a bigger jurisdiction why that would be needed. And I can see a consultant being needed. I'm just saying that, paying for quote community input we're in a unique situation in Ross, given that it's a small town and we all have our ear to the ground anyway. And even if we had one council meeting where we, tried to get specific groups to, give us some input, that could be a pretty efficient way of getting information from those groups on what they feel, is needed. And then I think also, what I think is helpful for staff to remember is how much people like things in Ross to stay the same. I mean, people are not asked to join or don't join the council, and people don't vote for people to join the council to make changes. It's always to preserve this town. So, sure, things should be ADA compliant. That hedge probably needs to be redone, but I also think that, as I've said before, it's not like you walk around the commons and think, God, this town really is lacking in charm. We need to do something here. So that's my perspective. Thanks.
Yeah, I agree with you, Elizabeth. And I mean, I think we do have to be careful about spending money on consultants, because even if, it's a small part of our budget, those are the sorts of things that when we're going out for, for taxes or for the facilities, bond or whatever, that people really nail us on. They say, like, why are you spending all this money? So I wouldn't mind, as Elizabeth just said, a council meeting where we just invite people to offer comments, or a workshop about, is there anything you would like to change in the common where, we're focusing on making improvements and renovations where they're necessary, and should others be added? And, the necessary have been identified as a hedge and as the pathway. And then it's like, should there be, are there other things? I just think we should go about it carefully.
I will
I,
just add that we anticipate that the consultant costs will be covered through that Prop 68 grant. So it's not actually our spending. It's money that we're entitled to anyway.
Are there other comments about this? Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions on any of the general fund capital items? Okay, so now we will be switching to the non-general fund. So we're in the special revenue funds, and Rich, and the gas tax fund is tab Q, page 24.
Yeah, so the gas tax is, it's made up of the highway users tax account and the road maintenance rehabilitation account, which was part of the Road Repair and Accountability Act of 2017. There are different categories of how we spend the usury tax and the RMRA taxes. So I work closely with our accountant to make sure that each year the proper projects are allocated correctly to gas tax and to the SB1 and RMRA accounts. Currently, the revenues plan to be mostly part of ADA improvements, handicap ramps out in the right-of-way where we have barriers to accessibility travels, especially where sidewalks cross into traffic areas. And we're working on a master plan to identify those, or we're actually updating a current master plan, not very expensive at all, to identify the expenditures for ADA improvements over the next coming years. The slurry seal of El Camino Bueno. So slurry seals are considered to be a maintenance type expenditure where you're not replacing the asphalt into a brand new surface. What you're doing with the slurry seal is you find a street that has either experienced recent underground utility work, or it's in a fairly good shape and you want to add maybe 5 to 8 years of life to it by giving it a seal to protect it from UV deterioration. This year we identified El Camino Bueno as meeting both of those categories. It was opened up and worked on by Ross Valley Sanitation District back in 2019. There was a series of open cuts within the road. The Ross Valley did come back and do some slurry sealing, but the pavement is such that it's in that pavement condition zone where we could get a good bang for the buck if we do a slurry seal on the entire roadway up there. And that closes the gap on those streets that were impacted by Ross Valley Sanitation and MMWD's extensive undergrounding. You may recall back in 2019, the summers of 2018 and 2019 will always be indelible in my memory, at least. And a portion of the cost associated with the annual pavement rehabilitation on Ross Common, Redwood Drive, along the Common, and the post office parking lot. So we can basically at the end of year, you do a journal entry to pull, if we want to spend a little bit more of the gas tax fund, it's more or less, I call it rearranging deck chairs, but we can pull, once we have satisfied the more maintenance related projects that qualify for gas tax expenditures, we can pull over some of the more capital type improvements, the roadway paving into reducing the balance on the gas tax fund under those portions of the highway user tax and the road maintenance accountability account, or road maintenance repair account that accept those type of capital type pavement restoration projects. So Any questions then on the gas tax fund projects or how we use it?
Thank you. I don't see any questions. You know, one thing, Joe, I wonder if we're going to be short on time, should we jump to the capital improvements? Because there might be more questions about that and then finish with the roadway and other funds? What do you?
But we're done with we're just in the capital in these funds, so they're part of these funds. So the only ones we have left are roadway and drainage funds. And then there's the 3 minor other funds I could say in 20 seconds.
And there's nothing more on the capital improvement plan that we need to go through?
The CIP, I mean,
tab
it's all reflected the current year and we had that conversation. So it's only if you want to talk about the CIP. I think that's more of a, if you guys have questions, I don't think we're really much to present there. We presented it at the February 25th and everything in there that's reflected in this coming budget year we're talking about as part of these budget.
Okay, then let's keep going with the roadway fund. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay.
And this is tab R, page 25.
So the roadway fund relies on both the fund balance, the roadway fund balance and annual revenues to fund these type of expenses. Primarily the road impact fees of 160,000. TAM measure AA comes in every year. It's been growing by a few thousand every year. We're at about 54,000 this year. With the Safe Pathways grant funding that we received in 2019 will hopefully be expending about $320,000 of that grant funding to get the Laurel Grove Safe Pathway project closer to construction. We've already started with our consultant moving in that direction. And the prior fund balance reserves of $235,000. So as we talked already, the road improvement 2020 road improvement rehabilitation plan includes Ross Common, Redwood Drive along the commons and the post office parking lot. And then we have the TAM Safe Pathways to School, which I just talked about, which includes the new pedestrian pathway all the way to Canyon Drive and connecting to the little piece of sidewalk we put in back in 2017 along Magic to close the gap there. With looking forward into the 5-year CIP of hopefully extending that pathway and hopefully having those extensions also funded by the next cycle of safe routes to school. And yeah, I mean, that pretty much covers the roadway fund projects for this year. If you have any questions on that, or we can move on, I believe, to drainage.
Oh, Julie McMillan has a question. Julie?
Rich, I think some of the residents who live along Laurel Grove past Canyon to Winding Way have contacted you. I know that they are very interested in providing private donations to get that pathway extended.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
so they have contacted me and I did respond. We once we get this, I'm calling this the second phase. The first phase was that small strip of sidewalk. Once we know the alignment, which side of the road the pathway is going to go on and how it's going to, if it's going to cross over at Canyon or where it's going to go, we'll have a better idea of scoping out any future segments. And I'd have to work out with Joe and a few other staff on how we would do a capital project with private contributions. But yeah, we do have a dialogue in place.
Great. And maybe it could be a hybrid of, some TAM money and some private donations to make it even better. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to drainage fund projects.
And this is
yeah, tab S, right, Joe?
yes.
So drainage fund revenues are budgeted at 517,000. Expenses are budgeted at 575,000. So local drainage improvements budgeted at 75,000 are paid with the impact fee portion, the drainage impact fee, which matches the roadway impact fee. It's the same percentage based on the same basis of building permit valuation. We're looking at a storm drain master plan now very seriously because I know our infrastructure is old and deteriorating. You can't see it. It's all underground. I've seen failures of our corrugated metal pipes causing the streets to open up into sinkholes, especially we had 2 sinkholes, I believe, up on Prospect in Winship Park, caused by the deterioration of old corrugated metal pipes. So the storm drain master plan will go through and evaluate some of our larger underground storm systems using video technology, and then we can do a cost benefit analysis and needs analysis and start spending money over the next 5 years to improve our town maintained storm system. Then the Winship Bridge, budgeted expenses of $350,000 for the year to be funded by the Federal Highway Bridge Program, the HBP, and contributions from Marin County Flood Control District. As we've talked about before, there are some challenges with the HBP as far as delivering the HBP funding in a timely manner so that would match our construction schedule. They've mentioned that the money that's programmed but not dedicated to the Winship Bridge at this time may not be available until 2024. So we're working with Caltrans, MTC, and Marin County Flood Control District to see if we can close some of the gaps with the funding and keep this project moving. And we've had some success with the Marin County Flood Control District that are helping us pay for that portion of the work that is not eligible for HBP funding. So they're closing the gap too. We can talk about that too if you have any questions on that. And I believe this is the only drainage fund project slide, right, Joe? Okay. So any questions on drainage fund projects?
Yeah, I'm concerned about this delay. I know that we don't have full control over it at all. And I know that we're making efforts to get it done some other way, but we're holding up San Anselmo's flood control project, I believe, because they don't want to go, they recognize that they shouldn't go ahead until we've got the Winship Bridge done. So it's affecting not just us, but also San Anselmo. And I'd like us to see if there's some other ways we can put some pressure on HBP to recognize that this is a project that ought to be given priority because it's holding up other things.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Right. So we have got together with the county personnel, and we did talk to Jared Huffman's secretary. We told the county led that discussion because it is the interest of the county to get their projects going into construction as well, and they have certain grant timelines as well. So the county is very interested in making sure Winship Bridge stays on track. And yeah, we're doing all we can, at least from the town's perspective. And I am almost a weekly basis talking with flood control on how we can move forward without missing a step.
Elizabeth.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just want to say to Beach's point, I think that's a really fair point. I just get so frustrated because the EIR that was done was woefully legally insufficient if there were 2 projects that needed to be done together. And so now we're getting put into some box because the flood district did the EIR wrong. And it's just, you don't even have to be a specialist in CEQA to know that that is was wrong. And so, I don't feel particularly, like my hands are tied because of San Anselmo's decision, because that wasn't our decision. And we should make the right decision for Ross. And, if they want to do some kind of different program or different that addresses both areas at once, then, they should have thought of, I think the flood district should have thought of that before. So I'm just critical of that, handling of that, because we didn't even have a weigh-in on the San Anselmo project. So anyway, that's it.
Are there any other comments or questions or responses about the drainage fund? I mean, I agree with you, Elizabeth. I mean, that's sort of what I'm hearing too. It's certainly not the town of Ross's fault that there were, errors made, and they're just going to have to slowly get fixed.
I do want to just add, and it's not related to what you're saying, but it is related to the budget, that the county is going to the Board of Supervisors next month to augment their current reimbursement contract with the town to cover all of our CEQA costs. They were obligated to do that anyway through the agreement, but it went over budget about $36,000, and they've agreed to cover those additional costs. But I just wanted to mention that. So,
well, and then just one more question, follow up. So we're planning on spending $350,000 on the bridge plan, which is needed to move the process forward. Is that correct? I mean, I'm just wondering, it's kind of like getting us deeper and deeper into, flood district planning when we don't even have an ultimate spending, idea when the revenue is coming in. But that's the decision, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And that money, the 350,000, is not even programmed yet through the HPP, and our consultant would need to augment or come back to council with a contract amendment to even move forward and finish final design. So if we are moving forward, we're not going to be spending any money at risk. We're going to come back to the council and we're going to say, this is what it's going to cost. This is where HBP is at. This is where the county funding is at. This is what the outlook looks like. And we would present it to the council that way in order to see whether we want to move forward or not in the future. So that could be within the next 3 months, that, things come to a stop until we come back to council and see if we want to move forward with additional consultant expenses even before construction.
But this wouldn't come out of town coffers. This is not town money. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're not going to move forward with spending out of pocket without future council buy-in.
So is there a possibility we're spending out of pocket for this? I thought this was all covered.
At this point, we're not spending anything out of pocket, especially with the Marin County Flood Control throwing in the $35,000 to cover our CEQA costs. Staff is not going to do anything out of pocket without running it by council and getting approval on contract amendments or construction costs. So you'll have another chance to review that. Currently, there's no out-of-pocket expenses.
It just sounds like there could be. I thought that there never was expected to be out-of-pocket expenses.
So if we wanted to accelerate construction of the bridge prior to having a commitment of funding from HBP, that's where we would either do it out of pocket, or we'd look to the county for call it a loan, or you can call it an advance of funding, with the anticipation that once HBP comes online in 2024, we would repay that sort of funding. So we're thinking about ways to move forward with construction. not without council buy-in.
Well, why would we even do that? I mean, the bridge, it's narrow, so they call it functionally obsolete, but it's not falling down. Why would we risk moving forward if the town might end up having to pay? That doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, the bridge has been identified, we've met on this many times, functionally obsolete. That the walkway is not compliant. The bridge itself is a earth structure that can't really be rehabilitated. And it's a question of leaving the future deferred maintenance of that to our posterity, or we do it now with the chance of rebuilding it with grant funding. So, but that's needs to be an informed council decision.
Okay, I mean, I guess having once dealt with a state when we were trying to redo part of the school, the chance of funding is not the same as having it in the bank. And I don't like moving ahead when there's a chance. I only like moving ahead when the money's in the bank and it's not ours. That would be my strategy, unless the bridge is unsafe, which it isn't. But thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see any other hands on this topic.
Should I move to the last of the funds? So these could go real quick. Tab T, public safety tax. It's generates $906,000 a year. The CPI index for this year, coming tax year, is 1.5%. So the tax is going to be at $1,085 per parcel. So I said this is a straight transfer out. The budget page just says the revenue, and it's basically all transferred out to the operating fund to pay for police and fire. The COPS fund is tab U, pretty straightforward. Basically, the COP funds is a state grant, and it essentially pays for the cost of one of our officers. And then the tab V is the general plan update fund that Patrick had talked about earlier. And for the coming year, we're expecting about $62,000 of revenue and transferring $30,000 for applicable programs in the operating fund and $25,000 to the facilities fund. And overall, the goal is to build up money here, because when you really do the general plan, obviously, that's an expensive undertaking. So we do pay for elements as they come up, but then in a few years we'll be in the general plan. So if there's any questions about any of these other funds.
Julie?
Just a quick question on the, when does this public safety tax expire, and when are, I don't want to talk about it now, but we need to figure out when we're going to do the building fund, the facilities fund as well, the election for that. So I'm just wondering when the parcel tax expires.
A parcel tax could be a year up. It's either expiring at the end of fiscal year 24 or 25. So we still either have 4 or 5 years left on it. Sorry, I should know that off the top of my head.
We voted it in
16.
2016.
Yeah, but I don't think it became, the first year was probably then 18. So a fiscal year ending 18, 19, 20, 21. So I think it's fiscal year 20 ending 25. That is the last year of the 8 years.
And we want to do the election like at least probably a year before that.
At least you'd want to be a year before.
Okay, thanks.
And if that's incorrect, I will correct it. I will look it up after this. If it's end of year 25, it could be end of 24, but I think it's 25. But I'll let you know if it's not 25 going through. Any other questions on these other funds? And then that brings us to the last part, and we talked about it. It's just if you have, and we don't have any set presentation, it would be if there's any kind of questions on the capital improvement document, similar to the document that you saw back in February. Outside, obviously, we update it for any things that happened between then, which is just really numbers. I don't think any nothing. Yeah, it was just, and would they, anything in the CIP in the coming fiscal year, the CIP covers 5 years, but obviously those that relate to fiscal year 21-22 would be in the budget that we've talked about. But if there are CIP questions at this time, or, just general capital improvements, now is the time. Otherwise, I'm done. We're done as staff, unless you have questions on anything else.
Well, I'd like to return for a moment to this business about the numbers budgeted for improvement of the commons. I thought I detected 3 of us who had concerns about that, and yet we seem to have passed over it without discussing what we might do in the alternative. Rather than be criticized for spending a lot of money, we know 2 things. We know that hedge needs removed and replaced, no question. And our staff tells us, and I believe them, that the path needs work. I think it would be entirely adequate from the standpoint of the residents of this town to have a discussion at a town council meeting and permit people to provide alternative thoughts on whether there's anything else, and then get on with it without necessarily having to spend a lot of money to have community meetings to decide about this issue. I just don't think it's a big enough deal that it merits the expense of time and money to have community meetings about this issue. Thank you.
I agree with you, Beach. It's also an expenditure of political capital. There's a limit to how much time people want to spend on town issues. And we want them to weigh in on the facilities issue. We want them to weigh in on the flood control project. And this isn't, unless this is, it's sort of like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I agree with you, Beach. That period. I agree with you.
I could mention some of the things we've heard from 3 constituencies that definitely want to visit. Every time I'm on RPOA meeting, they're mentioning things they want to see at the Common and downtown and different ideas. I hear from Ross Auxiliary people who use it with.
What do they want to see?
They want to see a restroom. They're talking restroom facilities on the Common or around the Common. A lot of people, I've heard from many, many people about more seating areas from the age-friendly people, from age-friendly to families. I've definitely heard the whole seating thought. I've heard from, obviously we still have the whole dog issue to be discussed on where's the proper place on the Common, the post office. Should it be fenced off? Not in a whole community that is going to be, you are going to have people with different thoughts on the dog issue. I've heard from youth sports groups and just the seating, a lot of people about the downtown, the need for more seating there. I've heard some people say we need seating coming across from the post office. We've had Janelle Hobart, who took a look at it and said it should be realigned. Our gateways are weak. You come across from the post office and you end up in the middle of a hedge. The downtown's not connected as well with seeing. So I guess we've heard many comments over the 2 or 3 years as staff. I don't know. And if you listen to RPOA, you'll hear them on a regular basis about things they want to do on the Common, and Ross Auxiliary is certainly. So I think, could we get, now we are under contract, obviously we could cancel the contract. I think I think that's short-sighted, because I think there is a big, if you do it, you want to do it right. And we do know we need to rehabilitate the pathway. And even like Robert Marcario saying that pathway in places should be moved. but then it's moved for where do you move it to the right spot? I don't think, it's not saying that we need a new baseball field or soccer field. It's not about that, but it is a lot of the orientation and the socialization. And your downtown is your central focus of this town. I mean, the reality is between the common, the post office, the school, and our small downtown, and trying to make our small downtown something better than a bigger, to help it where we can. This is the central part of your community. Clearly, we could decide not to do it. I don't necessarily want staff running the meetings with all these elements, quite frankly. I'd rather not have staff. I'd rather have a professional consultant be doing it, just like, and I'm just saying, we brought Mig in for the facilities, and I think it was money well spent. I just think, in the common, I think this could be a big positive for the community, quite frankly, because I think the common is well used. There are a lot of great things, but there's a chance to fix some things and improve some things. But that's my thought. But if council does want us not to go the consultant, we could choose not to. I think that's putting a heck of a lot of pressure on staff to come through this, unless you want to just do status quo, but it's leaving a lot of issues for the future. And I think now's the time to deal with them and get them fixed.
So Elizabeth and then Julie.
Yeah, I'm just still more in Beach's camp. I think that, if Janelle or Michael Yandel wanted to get together, and we'll pay him to decide if we should move over the entrance from the post office, I could be open to something like that. A hedge around that redo, fine. The path, I think, is in the fine location, and we don't need to rethink everything and do irrigation and new grass and everything else. And a bathroom, I think, is not needed and not a great idea, and nobody's going to want it near their house. And then it's going to be an attractive nuisance for kids and an expense we don't really want to incur. I really think that we are at risk of, redoing this thing with, overdoing this thing. And I think we could have a council meeting where we do reach out and, keep it low budget. And finally, I think that the dog park is a little bit of a sore issue, because it's just clear to me, Joe, that there's a staff perspective. I don't know if it's really being led by Ross Rec or from the school influence to get rid of this dog park or relocate it. And I just think you need to understand how many people like it, and it's not broken. And, I have a small grass area. When my kids want to go and play up there, first they have to go pick up some dog crap there. It's fine. It's fine. I mean, are we really so sensitive that we can't have kids in that space? I ask my daughter all the time. She says, nobody has an issue with this. And so I think that I think that is not a reasonable approach.
Julie.
Well, I don't really want to talk about the dog park again, but I don't think that there's no school that has an unfenced dog park adjacent to the school between the drop-off and the school. And I think, I don't know how many complaints Michael McDowell has about kids being scared or kids being bitten by dogs. I mean, that's all to be determined down the road. I discussed this issue with the council in 2012. And I think, it bears further discussion. But maybe I misheard, but I thought Patrick said that the funds being used to do this study were coming from a grant. Is that right, Patrick?
That's correct.
And, it seems like there's a lot of disjointed comments about the common. And I think, if we have an opportunity to look at it more systematically, it couldn't hurt. And it's probably a once in a, 10 or 15 year opportunity where we can step back and look at the common and, address some of the issues and enhance it. And I think because the money's coming from a grant and ultimately we will be enhancing the common, we'll get more political capital than just, changing the pathway in certain areas and changing a hedge. Those are my 2 cents.
Elizabeth?
Well, the grant money could be used either for the consultants or it can be used for actually redoing the work. So it's not like it's just specific for, they'll only pay for consultants, but they won't pay for the work. So it is in that way truly our money, right?
We could use it for construction. It's anything with a park.
Is anyone worried that a project starting this right now is going to confuse people and get in the way of our interest in getting people on board for the facilities project? I mean, I worry a bit about that. I mean, that's not designed yet, and we don't have votes yet for that bond measure. And that's sort of what we've put out as our big project. I guess I'm still in the camp of why not, open it up to a council meeting and invite people to say, just sort of take a step back and ask for a little bit of input before we, spend a fortune on it, not a fortune, but 50,000 on a consultant and then assume we're going to spend 400,000. I don't mind paring it down a bit, especially given that we're going to be asking for 2 parcel taxes coming up, the public safety tax and the facilities tax.
I guess, how do you want, I think this is a big enough, important enough issue. We've heard from enough residents, unless you really want, I think this is your opportunity to look at something different. I don't know if staff to do this right, unless you want staff to run it, but it's much easier to have a facilitator because there's going to be people, though staff doesn't have a position on the dogs. We just know there's a conflict in this community about the dog park issue. The dog, obviously it's been there and not. And do you put staff or do we have a consultant help through that issue? And as the Councilmember McMillan mentioned, you don't have a dog park in front of a school. There have been people bit. There's liability issues there. A real dog park has a fenced in area. Do you fence it in on the common? Do you fence it in across the street? Or do you leave it as is? But there's real issues. But most dog parks have fences. And this community, there's a lot of issues here in this whole seating. Where do you want it and move it out? And to put staff in the position then to run it, or do we just do nothing but kick all these issues? Now's your chance to fix it. You look at, I'll look like our design guidelines. We had $100,000 worth of consultants on that. We obviously brought MIG in on the facilities to help with a very, very small segment. We don't go to consultants that much. Frankly, some of the consultants wanted over $100,000 to do this project. And obviously we said, no way, this is not. So, but if you don't want us to have consultants, we won't. But I think that's kind of short-sighted if you wanted to resolve these issues. Otherwise, I think you're just going to have, I don't know how it's better to have them come to council without a facilitator and people doing it and the time it's going to take to run that properly from staff.
Is this
versus somebody that is used to being in these conversations relate to parks and issues all the time.
So then this isn't, I mean, it sounds like this isn't just that you're repairing the path and you want the hedge replaced. You're talking about basically deciding where the dog park goes. I mean,
well, that's part of it. The question is who's using this facility and how is it being used? And right now you got that post office across the street with no use, and maybe that's how we want it. Maybe it's just a greenscape. Maybe that's how it's to be. And you definitely have what type of seating and where do you put seating? That I've heard from every age group of that we need more seating on the common for different things, for different functions. Some want it from downtown, some want it, they meet people at the post office and want to have a place to go sit down. Others after sports games. I've heard it from multiple groups of all different factions. But the dog park's going to be a controversial, no doubt about it.
That's part of it.
And it's
So-
not a dog park. Let's say it's a area that dogs use. It's not a park, but there is a liability when somebody runs and a dog comes and bites them running on that path. That is a liability issue we have.
So Julie, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I maybe I should put it down. I was just thinking, is there a compromise? Is there any kind of compromise position where we could have this on the council agenda, get some feedback from the public, and then reassess whether we should go forward with a consultant? Because I'm all for going forward with a consultant, but it seems like right now we don't have the support for that. And maybe it's because people need to be a little more educated about, what the opportunities are to enhance the common. And that could be generated by more public comment at a council meeting.
I mean, I sort of understand, that as Joe's saying, that it's more about how do we use it, and there are decisions to be made with the dog park. So I'm kind of more open-minded. Let's see, Elizabeth and then Patrick. Oh, Elizabeth, you're muted.
No, I guess if I'm fine. My decision is clear to me, but I'm willing to listen to others.
And Patrick?
Yeah, I just wanted to add a piece of information that the council may not have, is that the grant has to be applied for by the end of this calendar year. So if we do put off, working with this contract, we run the risk of not, if we do decide to go through the consultant, not being able to collect those funds. And we'd have to settle on, if we did want to apply those funds directly to improvements to construction, we'd have to have that figured out by the end of the year as well. And just speaking from planning staff's perspective, our planning department is a staff of 2. So as Joe was saying, to really put that kind of focus on with these competing groups, it is going to take a lot of staff resources, probably not $50,000 worth, but it would be a significant amount of staff resources. Other projects would have to take the back seat while this consultant is being funded through a grant. So it's not actually our operational budget that's going towards it. So I would just say that if the council chooses that we want to take a seat back, we run the risk of losing that grant money and not being able to apply it. And just anecdotally, when we were out on our walk the other day, somebody came up to us and said, "Hey, I really love these picnic tables that you put over in the side of the park. You should think about putting them in other places in the park." And that's a great idea. And as a planner, I'd love to reach out to the community and find out where they'd like to see seating areas. And then I'm probably going to hear from people that say, dogs should have these areas, the path should go here. It's a lot of just engagement that it would be a lot easier for us to do as staff using a consultant. As I said, we do have the funds available through a grant. So that's just my 2 cents on it, and just the additional information that the grant applicability does expire at the end of the calendar year.
I mean, to me, if it's sort of a more modest approach, like we could do a few things and we could do it with one meeting, the thought of, 3 community meetings to get input about the common, that's just like way overkill to me for something like this. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's really overkill. And I think that, I guess I'm blown away that we need to have a consultant for this kind of thing. And I think it's,
I just don't think it's reasonable. And, you know, I'm ticked off as a taxpayer. And I think that, you know, also, you know, if between now and the end of the year, we can't develop a plan to make some good needed improvements and then apply for a grant for them, I think that is, let me put you in touch with the right people who can, because I think we can. I think that that's totally doable. And I think that we should, I don't think we need to pay a consultant to hear what people want in this town. I think that's our job. I think we can.
Are we
direct that
committing
conversation.
50,000 to a consultant? I mean, is there a way to have like one meeting and not pay a consultant 50,000?
Could
Yeah,
look to alter it.
We could talk about altering the scope of the contract.
And the contract now is what is it? What does it entail right now?
The contract includes at least 3 public engagement meetings and preparation of a master plan based on the feedback from the community. So circulation plan and programming.
I mean, I think if there's one meeting makes sense, you know, invite people to, you know, to mention that we're doing some improvements and invite people. 3, I don't even know that we had 3 for the facilities, you know, I mean, 3 is really too much for the common. If we could modify it so that there's 1, I mean, I get how maybe there will be some issues that a consultant might help with. Where the dogs go is an issue, and the bathroom's going to be a disaster. The school decided decades ago we didn't want a public bathroom out there because it's going to be an attractive nuisance. People are going to be there all, you know, you can't, who's going to clean it and who's going to be making sure that there's no untoward behavior there. So, I mean, I see that there are issues that, you know, a consultant could help you with, but you know, I certainly would change it so that if we do use a consultant, one meeting is enough for the common. It's just not that big a deal.
And it should be clear that these are community engagement events, sort of. So one of them could be setting up a table in the common and getting feedback from people that are walking by. One could be a Zoom meeting that's a workshop. One could be a survey or something like that, or a questionnaire that's distributed. So it's three points of engagement over the course of the preparation. But we can certainly consider adjusting the scope of the contract, reducing the amount of engagement. As I mentioned before, it does include also the preparation of this master plan. And if we do it in-house, we can certainly do it, but it's going to be a drain on staff resources.
Beach, thank you. Beach?
I just think 3 meetings to discuss what to do with this area that has existed as it now is for ever since I've lived here is overkill.
So is there any suggestion about how, I mean, I'm kind of hearing that there is some interest in moving forward because there's some things that need to be repaired. There's some thorny issues that, like the dog park and bathrooms, that it might be helpful to have a consultant help us through the weeds. But there's certainly a sense that, you know, we don't want to invite our community members for 3 different events, even if one's just a picnic table, because it's just too much outreach for something that's not that big a deal. If people care about it, they'll come to the council meeting or they'll send us an email, but I don't think it needs that extensive outreach. But how would we go about this to like tone that down? Or do we just cancel it? What do people think? I guess I would tone it down a bit. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I would eliminate the bathroom discussion and the relocation of the dog park, which frankly, I don't think we need to hear again. And I would really see this as, you know, a replacement of things that we have out there versus redo. If there is some desire to try and relocate the entrance from the post office across to the commons, and how that works, I think that, you know, we could certainly ask, you know, have a consultant consider that or that kind of thing. I think inventing the commons is going to make people really frustrated, especially as we're, doing things like eliminating fire station.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of disagree about the dog. I do think that will be a topic that a lot of people are going to want to weigh in on. I mean, on both sides. So I don't know if that's so simple. I mean, I guess historically there's grass there, so it probably wasn't always for dogs because dogs destroy grass, but it certainly has been it's been come to be used that way. And now it's not for temporarily, but I do see that as, something that people are going to want to talk about. I don't think we can get it off our agenda so easily.
To be clear, none of these issues are in the scope of the project right now. We anticipate someone's going to come forward and say, hey, what about a bathroom in the common? And then we have to have analysis, and we have to get community feedback on that. Somebody's going to come forward and say, where should dogs be? Should it be the way it is, or should there be a separate dog park? And we're going to have community outreach and have analysis on that. We can't just go into this saying we're not going to talk about any of these topics. We're just talking about sidewalks, because there's going to be people that want to talk about these topics.
Well, I think that there's certainly a sentiment that 3 meetings, whatever format, is way too much. That a simple meeting is adequate. There's probably a consensus that 50,000 is too much just to talk about this. But I guess I don't think I understand what the master plan would be. I mean, and again, I do think we need to be careful about master planning the common when we're already master planning the facilities and talking about the flood, and we're not hearing. I mean, if people want a bench, you put up a bench, but we're not hearing that the whole thing needs to be rethought out. I don't know. I'm kind of up in the air. I wouldn't mind staying the course with this grant money if the scope is pared back and it's not, we're going to redo the common, but it's clear what we're intending to do.
Hearing council, so let staff kind of redo this, obviously scale back. And I mean, we could come, unless you don't want a consultant at all, if you tell us that, but what I'd look to do is scale it, talk with our staff, consultants, see how we could scale it back. But there are to still have these issues, unless you don't want a consultant at all, but you still have some of these issues to deal with. And as I said, it will be a lot of staff time. I think the dog issue is going to be a big issue, and it's not just going to go away.
I mean, I think since staff is asking for extra help, I'm okay to stay with a consultant, but I do think that it's important to, as we've been saying, scale it down. Nobody wants 3 meetings of any, a single council meeting is adequate. We don't want that much outreach. It just doesn't make sense. I see your hand up, Rich.
Yeah. One of the things that I think was the origin of the whole master plan and figuring out what to do is I think I came to Joe and said, these pathways are bad. They're a trip hazard. They're decaying. It's one of the many times that we've ignored getting these things repaired and kicked it down the road. I need to get these pathways. I need a contract to get these pathways resurfaced. And we came up with some costs and things like that. But then it was like, well, once we do that, and it needs to be done sooner rather than later, you really are, then you've spent money and you're locked into where those pathways go. And that kind of drove the idea of, well, where should they go? How should when we repurpose 6 Redwood in a year or two, how does that work in with the pathways? How do we make that accessible if we want to put places for people to sit or have a picnic table? We need to make it accessible. Well, gee, now's the time to, if we're going to redo these pathways, we need to make sure whatever we have planned for 6 Redwood or for the place where the dogs are, to know where these pathways are going. So, well, the answer to me was, well, Rich, let's put that off, repairing these horrible pathways until we get some input from the public. Maybe we would try to master plan it and work out how we interface the Ross Common with the the restaurants in the downtown area. And that's kind of how the master plan, the method of vetting these type of improvements came about. And if we're going to be going back to just, discussing this and that at a council meeting, we really need to get these pathways fixed. And I don't want to make it sound like it's, we need to decide today. But there were those sort of things that were driving the decision to create a master plan for this area. We need to know where these things are going to go, and not patchwork it in by just a decision from Public Works or something like that. So just wanted to throw the origins of this master plan into the discussion.
Thank you. Beach?
I want to raise one other thing that maybe other people aren't thinking about. As far as I'm concerned, our ability to change a lot of things other than the present location of the path and the hedges is going to be strictly limited by the fact that we have to leave these things available for athletic use. We have to have baseball fields without benches in the middle of them. We have to have lacrosse fields and soccer fields. And so that's going to very much limit how much we can really change, I think, unless we want to just change the total demeanor of the area and eliminate athletic activities.
Thank you.
Yeah. And there has been I've never heard anybody say, there are a lot of things were great, including the playing fields. So I think it's more of the pathways, the hedges, the landscaping. It's not the overall functionality that's the discussion. There's no talk about changing how the sports fields for the playing field area.
Beach, you're muted.
I mean, I'm not saying the people are going to want to change it. I'm saying that the fact, if we want to keep it as it is, which I think is just a given, it very much limits what we can do. You can't put bathrooms in the middle of a lacrosse field. You can't put benches in the middle of a baseball field. So it's going to limit what we can do with some of these things. Can't put a path in the middle of them either.
I mean, I think it makes sense to take a short look at, as we're redoing paths and hedges, should there be changes? And as you say, where dogs are may come up, and if there's a bathroom may come up, and those will be very, people will discuss that quite a bit. But Joe, do you have enough direction to go ahead? It feels like we're okay to stay the course, but modestly. Is that the sense of everybody? Or is there a majority to do that? Okay. Does that help you, Joe? Joe?
So I do hear, so modest, but stick with having a consultant, or am I not to have a consultant?
I think to have a consultant, but to make sure the consultant is instructed that there can be a council meeting where we ask, as we're redoing the hedges and the pathways, should other things be redone? That's the question, and not pose it as a major commons redo, because one, council members don't seem to think it's necessary, and two, I think it's a lot to take on while we're doing all these other projects. And but yes, the consultant, just kind of pare down his scope, her scope, whatever.
Okay, let's have the direction. Patrick, any questions or?
No, I think the direction is pretty clear. So we'll work with that guidance.
Okay. Thank you. It is rather hear it now, obviously have this conversation now, or the earlier they happen, the better. Any other things on the budget? we're past 12:30, but obviously, I don't know, I think that was affecting one member, but are there other questions on anything? Is that me? Well, I'd like to thank all of you for your time. I also want to put a big thank you to staff who put together the budget, and especially Liz Ford, who really does a great job in getting all the information and documents together and relate to the budget, and the staff for their work, and Linda for helping put together the budget and going through it. So, and I want to thank you for your time. Obviously, this is a big commitment of your time, and thank you for your thoughts and comments, and appreciate you taking your time on a Thursday morning and early afternoon. So, and if we were here, you guys would be having lunch. So sorry, you don't even get your free lunch. So you're volunteer with no lunch.
Then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
So long, everyone. Thank you.